Howdy, channel. Long time no see. Random Friday night stream. Won't do too much of a preamble. Just that I'm going to be looking at the beta rules for the Cosmere RPG from Brotherwise. Cosmere, obviously, maybe not obviously. Um, Cosmere is the main, like, massive setting for Brandon Sanderson's most popular works, book series like the Stormlight Archive and Mistborn and its various eras, and Elantris, Warbreaker, etc. Um, a book series that has been, you know, uh, getting published over the past probably like close to 20 years now, but I feel like recently found a large brand new audience over the past 2, maybe 3 years. I know I think I was aware of like a book called the Stormlight Archive, which is none of the books are named that. And it turned out after I got into the book series last year, or like maybe a year and a half ago, that I already owned The Way of Kings from like some random bookshop where I grabbed it and then never once picked it up to read, which I'm prone to do. Um, but yeah, the Cosmere has gotten extremely popular over the past couple years. It was popular, but still niche. I feel like even now to just book readers and the fantasy genre of um, in book reading has gotten a lot of new eyeballs over the past couple years, really since the pandemic. But I feel like we're kind of reaching a peak over the past 12 to 18 months. And even though most of the eyeballs are on different subgenres, I think this is one of those instances of a rising tide lift all boats, and new eyeballs hit Brandon Sanderson's work, including mine. And I've really enjoyed all of the books that I've read. I think I've read maybe 10 or so of the Cosmere. I'm not completely caught up on the Stormlight Archive. I am on the final book of Mistborn Era 2 right now, and have read Warbreaker and then all the Stormlight novellas as I've gotten to where I need to go. That said, I don't think that this RPG system necessarily spoil anything. My understanding is that these beta rules are specific to the Stormlight setting. So the book series, the Stormlight Archives, that begins with the Way of Kings and the specific magic system and the world there. Though the second setting game is kind of trying to figure out how exactly they're connected is about where I'm at, trying to figure out how the books are connected. I know they are, but it's not incredibly obvious quite yet. Or it's in really, really big picture ways. So I know the Stormlight setting books will be coming out in 2025 and the Mistborn books in 2026. Extremely, extremely popular Kickstarter. I also backed it. That was back in the fall of last year, and I backed it sight unseen. I did not need to look at it to know that I wanted it. And I'm not doing anything on a Friday night, and my doctor prescribed Adderall is still going, and so I kind of have some focus and need to spend it. So, looking at the beta rules for the first time, my gut says this is probably gonna feel pretty similar to Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if it's like fifth edition. I don't think it's based on anything specific, but like you can write a game that is almost Dungeons and Dragons without necessarily having to use anything in the license, because the game functions, things like dice mechanics are not IP. They're not trademarkable. Like Wizards of the Coast doesn't own the trademark on rolling a d20 and adding a attribute modifier to it. So yeah, this is what we're gonna do today, just for fun. And I probably should open up chat. I don't think anybody's gonna be in here. Pretty confident, but never know. I've been wrong before. Alrighty, so let's look. So we got the Cosmere role-playing game beta rules preview. This preview contains excerpts from the Stormlight Handbook and the Stormlight World Guide. Has not undergone copy editing, doesn't include final art, totally fine. Things I don't really care about usually. Provided for playtesting purposes and as a preview. Sweet. All these lovely people made this game happen. So we have Brandon Sanderson, the book author, as executive producer, and I know he's pretty involved. He's involved with all of his stuff. Creative director Johnny O'Neill, with the lead designer being Andrew Fisher, lead writer Lydia Swin, lead editor Laura Hirsbrunner, project leads Lila Fujiwara and Anthony Joyce Riviera. Several additional designers. I feel some of these names kind of look familiar, but I could just be pulling that out of my butt. I've never played any of the. I think Brotherwise before this has mainly been making like board games. I think this is their first RPG, tabletop RPG. So I'm not sure if these are folks that they already had that just kind of switched into. Probably, I'm sure TTRPG fans, or if these are folks from other things I would recognize if I had a memory. So we got contents. We will skip this. Let's stay surprised. Oh, did I finish? I don't think I really. I think I started to talk about spoils and then stopped. My gut says that this will essentially spoil some things about the Way of Kings, the first Stormlight Archive book. Now, like, I would consider these pretty light spoilers. Like, you expect epic fantasy like this in a world where you kind of know magic of some sort exist, that like, oh, we're probably like something's gonna happen. And depending on if they use any proper nouns, some things may like specific to the books might get spoiled. But yeah, so I guess if you've been meaning to read the Stormlight Archives and don't want anything spoiled, don't turn this off. Go pick up The Way of Kings and read it. I imagine this might even this will probably spoil the second book too. But anyway, so there's your spoiler warning, I guess. That if you don't want probably the first book and a half spoil, at least book and probably, now that I'm thinking about it, I read them back to back, so it's kind of hard to separate what was in what. Definitely the first two books with The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance. I mean, kind of Oathbringer book 3 too. Yeah, kind of. I doubt it's really specific stuff, but it is kind of just like the world developing. So this is a tabletop RPG, which you and a group of friends collaborate to tell story heroes in a fantasy universe called the Cosmere. Under or non-capitalized C in the Cosmere, not copy edited. The first campaign setting for this system is in the world of Roshar, based on the acclaimed novels of Brandon Sanderson's The Stormlight Archive. Early preview to give you understanding of the system, enough rules to run a playtest adventure Bridge 9. As a beta test, these rules have not undergone final editing. Elements of gameplay may change. Okay. These rules have been shaped by hundreds of playtesters since their alpha testing began in 2023 and should reflect an accurate preview of the final system. Cool. This is a condensed set of rules, only reflects a portion of the content we'll include in our first 3 hardcover releases. Stormlight Handbook seems kind of like the core rulebook and features full character building rules, talent trees for every path in the game, skills and talents descriptions, purchasing or crafting items, interesting, detailed rules for different scene types. Cool, I like how that sounds. We then have the world guide, which is setting book. And then the Stonewalker's Adventure, first official Stormlight adventure written in close partnership with Brandon Sanderson and Dan Wells. Takes players from 1st through 6th level on an adventure across the entire continent. Love, especially in IPs like this. Love it when folks deliver adventures. And I knew all this when I backed it, though I did not spend a lot of time investigating because I knew I was going to buy it. But it's been 4 or 5 months, and I'm just kind of doing this for the first time. So it's almost like remembering what I got. So we've got some setting info that, again, like, I hesitate to really talk about too much. They're not, I mean, they are imperative to the story, but we'll be able to get a sense of the system without necessarily knowing some of the setting stuff. I will read this. Roshar is a rich setting for tabletop role-playing, not only for its unparalleled world building, but for its strong emotional core. In Stormlight series, a character's power and mastery grow directly in proportion to their emotional and personal development, which is true from my own personal readings and understandings of the book, my own personal POV and experience reading them. But I think that's a good way to kind of think about things and growth in TTRPGs. Not everybody's that way. My table isn't really like that much. But I like that it's kind of codifying it. Like, if you're leveling up, you're gaining access to more power, more things to do, or more tools in your toolkit. But all this comes with the emotional, personal growth, which makes sense knowing what I know of the book system. I almost just want to just talk about things without making this like trying to avoid spoilers, because now I feel like I'm really hamstringing myself. But I know my audience isn't necessarily like book folks, mainly like TTRPG folks, and by audience I mean who? Anyway, collaborative experience. Yep. Roll dice to determine whether these sections are good for you. Yep. Okay. Where we're getting our general, what is a role-playing game scenario. We have PCs and we have a game master. We have NPCs. GM has final say on what ultimately happens in the story. Roll. The GM is infinitely flexible as they improvise in response to unexpected player choices and dice rolls. The GM isn't the player's adversary. This was a guide and collaborator in creating a story together. It's true that the GM is responsible for determining which dangers and enemies PCs face, but the GM's ultimate goal is to facilitate a story the whole group finds compelling and satisfying. Cool. So the game itself is played out in a series of sessions. GM sets the scene, players decide what they do, GM narrates the result. Yeah, okay. So you need a character sheet, you need dice. So it looks like we're playing with standard polyhedral RPG dice. This game uses a unique plot die with special symbols to trigger unique effects. They will, of course, sell you special plot dice in the future. You can designate as a d6. Okay. Safety tools. Yeesh. They've got a section with links. Cool. To expanded online content, safety tools in the GM's chapter. Love that. Maps and minis. Supports theater. The many players enjoy having visual aids. Includes grid maps and included tokens for the start of which are okay. So all this is feeling pretty familiar. So we have a skill test using a d20. All right, so yeah, it's what I thought it was going to be. Roll 1d20. You add your skill modifier. You add any bonuses or penalties. Some tests gain bonuses or penalties from other circumstances, such as your talents or plot die complications. Okay, so we're getting a little variety. We're comparing to a DC. Yeah, so everybody's going to feel pretty familiar to this. So now that I kind of know that we are playing a D20 game, now we can kind of just like make some borderline assumptions on what defaults are and then see what gets added on top or what gets changed, what got changed, to see how we feel about these. So the plot die on especially important roles, the GM might have you add the plot die to introduce opportunities or complications. When circumstances make your test easier or harder than usual, you might roll an extra copy of a dice and then pick the most or least beneficial result. I hate advantage and disadvantage. So kind of bummed that it's here. It's just too swingy. Damage die. Sweet. How to read dice notation. So here's plot dice. Custom die uses the plot die. You don't automatically roll with every skill test is used to raise the stakes during tense moments and tests critical to the plot. NPC tests don't generally use the plot die. When you roll the plot die, the result might add a bonus to your test, but it can also result in unforeseen opportunities or complications arising from your actions. The plot die has 6 sides, 2 of which are blank. 2 sides have an opportunity symbol. Final 2 sides have a complication symbol. Okay, so raising the stakes. You roll your plot die at the same time as you roll your d20. GM might raise the stakes to emphasize tests that directly contribute to the current mission, play directly to a character's purpose, obstacle, or goals, or a test with high tension or dramatic importance as determined by the GM. Stakes can only be raised once per test, and they can't be raised after the d20 has already been rolled. So you can't know the result, and then the GM decide to raise the stakes. Make sense? Wonder if there's any way... Oh, yep, I just saw the header. I was about to ask if the player can determine to raise the stakes, and it looks like we can. When you roll the plot die with your test, the effect depends on whether you roll an opportunity, complication, or blank. If you roll blank, nothing really happens. We'll see. Some abilities give your character the ability to raise the stakes yourself. Even if you don't have one of those abilities, when you think a test is worthy of raising the stakes, you can ask the GM to raise the stakes, and you can advocate for it. Cool. This does feel like one of those situations where not everybody likes meta currency. Was actually just saw a TikTok yesterday of a fellow TTRPG creator who hates meta currencies, where if you've seen me on the channel, I really like meta currencies. And raising the stakes yourself feels like the kind of thing a meta currency would actually like kind of be helpful with. It's like, yeah, you can just ask the GM, but what if you had a way of like cashing in on a meta currency in order to raise the stakes yourself? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that would never happen. Just where my brain went. Unexpected plot twists. You and the GM should use them to advance the plot, adding excitement and drama. Your test can gain an opportunity or complication when you roll the plot die, when an ability grants it, or when you roll a 20 or a 1 on your d20. Cool. Okay. So separate from the plot die, we have opportunities and complications. The plot die is like the whole purpose of the plot die is to generate opportunities and complications, but they also happen elsewhere outside of the plot die, which I like. So it's like the plot die is just a mechanic power like that taps into a new system. And when I say new, I just mean new compared to 5e. Cool. All right, so let's see what happens. When you gain an opportunity, you get a beneficial effect, and you choose one. You aid an ally, provide advantage to an ally of your choice. You can recover 1 focus. You can choose to critically hit when attacking during an attack test. Or you can influence the narrative. Your actions result in a positive narrative effect of your choice, which the GM must approve. This effect occurs regardless of whether the test succeeds or fails. Gotcha. If you fail on the ultimate goal of the test, but you still roll an opportunity on the test, you and your GM might decide you managed to pick the agent's pocket while you had your hands on them. Okay. I don't... Comparing this to something like Momentum in Modifius's 2d20 system, which is like another system outside of 5e that I feel like I have some level of grasp and understanding on. I don't love this kind of like open-ended effect of just the player gets to influence the narrative and then like calling out the GM must approve. But then their example, you and your GM decide seemingly kind of together. I don't like the phrase which the GM must approve, basically. Now, like, I realize some game designers go into designing a game understanding that unless you want to create rules for every little thing, you will never be able to like out design bad actors in a collaborative gaming arena, like playing a TTRPG. And some people like that, some people don't. I think it's true. And I still think that there are ways that don't require like creating a ton of rules that can help alleviate that the propensity for bad actors in the player arena. And I might be biased because I'm a GM always. And honestly have very limited experience sitting as a player, and I've never sat as a player at a table with a adversarial bad GM, though I know that they exist and people have some real horror stories out there. But it feels needlessly open-ended and really kind of hamstringing the GM as this like arbiter of what is possible in the story. And so like comparing it to something like Modiphius's 2d20 system with momentum and threat, like yes, it's a meta currency, and some people hate that, but it does create this system where the players do get to have a really direct influence on the narrative of the game, with there still being some boundaries. Like it's a pretty big sandbox, but there are still walls around the sandbox there which the GM must approve. That is a wallless sandbox, and I feel like if we just spun this into more of a something collaborative, some wiggle room beyond which the GM must approve, think that would be helpful. I think everybody would read it that, like, I think everybody would do that anyway, but someone would take this paragraph, highlight those 5 words, and then feel like they can give themselves like you're striking down the captain of the guard and you failed on the test, but you scored an opportunity. You decide to influence the narrative, and you decide that your attack left him unarmed, and that you're the captain now. Now, like, any good GM is going to back them down to, hey, that unarmed thing, that's perfect. That's a great opportunity to create for yourself. Like, you didn't strike the blow that you were intending to, but the opportunity that you created caused them to drop their spear. And so now they are, weaponless in front of you for whatever next thing happens. So let's just leave it there. But then it becomes this negotiation without anything to trade. And so I just see there being an opportunity for conflict there. So then on the complications side, GM chooses one of the following effects. You can hinder an ally, giving the next test taken by a PC gains disadvantage. The PC who rolled it becomes distracted, loses a focus, and then the GM influences the narrative. Some rules provide additional ways the GM should spend a complication. While complications are always negative, they can come with a bonus. If you gained a complication by rolling the plot die, you do gain a bonus to your skill test equal to the number displayed inside that complication symbol, either a +2 or +4. Okay, so I was wondering what that was over here in this first left-hand page. So in order to like keep player morale up and make people not feel incredibly crappy, yes, a complication happens, but your roll gets better, so you have a higher likelihood of actually succeeding on the test you're trying to do anyway. I like that. And to be honest, I haven't seen that super specific mechanic of a dice. I've seen plot die, but I have not seen one where the complication type effect actually grants bonuses in the moment to the test that's happening. Like, I think of, what was the Genesis system, that Star Wars game that was out for a few years in the late teens, early 20s. I think it's out of print, like gone now. They had a really specific, like a really funky dice system. And even getting like creating complications and or threats and like 2d20 don't help your immediate test. So I like that. I think it keeps the vibe up, which is an important thing to be considering when designing a game. So then, we also have opportunity and complication ranges. When you make a test, you gain an opportunity when your D20 rolls a number that falls within your opportunity range. By default, this range begins and ends at 20. So you gain an opportunity when you roll a natural 20. Blah, blah, blah. A natural 1, flip side. But yeah, the complication you get by rolling a natural 1 doesn't give you a bonus to the test. You're really only getting the bonus to your test when rolling the plot die, and it generates a complication. So a natural 1 on your D20 in a test roll still generates a complication. The same complication just doesn't come with a bonus. And like no bonus would helpful, like for sure. Oh, you can gain an opportunity or a complication from a natural 20 or a natural 1 even when you rolled the plot die. So sometimes you might face multiple opportunities or complications on the same test. True, something I didn't think about. You'll sometimes roll more than one D20 on a test, usually when you have advantage or disadvantages. In this case, a D20 only adds an opportunity or complication if that's the die or like the result you choose for your test. Makes sense. So you're not in doubling your chances of accidentally creating a complication because you got advantage on a thing. And like that's not even the dice you rolled, but you rolled a natural 1 on it. Or it's not the dice you use. It would suck to like roll a natural 1 when you have advantage, and because you had advantage and you rolled that 1, you now have a complication you have to deal with. Otherwise, you might not have. That's not how chances work, but people would feel bad. Some effects not included in this rule book expand the range of numbers that add an opportunity or complication to your roll. That's cool. That's a similar thinking about 2d20s momentum and threat, increasing the crit range for both, like the GMs being able to increase the range for threat generation and players being able to increase the range that they critically succeed on is a great, easy way of spending meta currency. And I could see, I guess I almost wish opportunities and complications didn't allow someone to pick advantage or disadvantage, because I don't like advantage as a system in general for D20 games. I wish it just like increased. You could like the next test gains a like increases the range and the opportunity range by like 3 or something. Or I wonder, I guess, yeah. So it doesn't increase the chances of like what you would normally consider a critical success. But we haven't read the rules on the determining success. Though I'm assuming it's a binary success metric. Did it meet or go above the DC or go above an opposing roll? Then like you succeed. So I wonder if critically succeeding automatically succeeds on the test in addition to creating the opportunity. Probably not. We have okay, here we go. Actions and reactions. Mainly in combat. So you usually have either 2 or 3 actions You can use these to do more than one thing on your turn, for example, moving towards a foe, then attacking them, or you can combine multiple actions into a single longer action, for example, recovering lost health. If a ability, okay, so we've got a three, I don't know why they say either 2 or 3 actions. Maybe certain classes have fewer actions available to them, or you get a third action at a certain level. But we have a action point similar system from, I know it from Pathfinder 2nd edition. I know it's not the only RPG out there with a point system, or a, like, what would you call, action point system. But it's an extremely popular one, and one that I've played and I'm familiar with. So we then have reactions. So these are actions that you can take on someone else's turn only when a specific trigger occurs. And you can typically only use one reaction between each of your turns. Typically, interesting. A lot of wiggle room here. Then you have free actions. Some activities don't require an action or reaction. You can freely banter during combat, even if you've used all your actions. Cool. So some general game conventions. GM has the final say. Specific beats general, yes. Minimum of 0. If an effect tells you to reduce a value, such as health or damage, you can't reduce it past 0. So you can't like make it -1 and get a bonus. Yep. Round down. Okay. Adventuring and advancement. Characters advance by achieving goals discussed in part 2 and gaining levels. The full core rulebook is going to include rules advancing characters to level 20 and beyond. Tight. And that first hardcover adventure only goes to 6? Hardcover to 6? That's like... I mean, barely into tier 2 play compared to 5e. That actually kind of seems small. Like, even to me, like a full campaign is you're getting characters minimum from 1 to 10 or 3 to 12 would be kind of my like, especially if I'm spending like full money. Like if a core rulebook, I think going price nowadays is $60 for like mass, you know, like big boy hardcover rulebooks. And I've seen campaigns go for similarly down to like maybe $40. $40 for 6-level adventure, unless it came with it. Okay, we'll see what happens. But that's kind of disappointing now, knowing that it's like a full, like, it does go to level 20. I was like, 1 to 6 makes sense if they don't, characters only ever go to level 10. I also wonder how they're handling, like, I have not read books 4 and 5. Book 5 just came out in December of this past November, around the same time that the backing, the crowdfunding for this was going up, which was good timing. But there's, at least through book 3, there have been rules established in the world building for levels, essentially, of the type, like the heroic magic superhero type characters that the RPG is going to be focused on. And so it's going to be interesting. I wonder if they're building with level 20 being the highest that they're aware of. We're aware of. But again, like when I say I haven't read 2 books, that means that there's like 3,200 pages I haven't read. So a lot could have changed. So I'm kind of, that was more just me kind of spitballing from what I know, which is not there's not enough information to ever know the answer. So, your character is a concept, a story waiting to be told. The Stormlight Handbook will provide detailed rules for the 7 steps: creating your backstory, choosing your attributes, choosing your skills and expertise, choosing your starting path. I think starting path is like class-esque. Some type of a framework for gaining abilities. Set your goals. I'm super excited to look into this. Equip yourself, calculate your stats. You can preview these steps, including examples of the radiant paths. Yeah, so the radiant paths are the what combination of 2 abilities from a like radial of 10 total powers. Each radiant path gets 2 side by side as you go along the radial. And so those paths will determine the abilities you have available to you, and probably some other stuff too. Hopefully things like I really prefer it when training impacts attributes, but if you're picking attributes at step 2, it doesn't look like we're going that way. We do have some pre-gens from the Bridge Knight adventure. So we have a summary. We have player name, character name, level, starting path, and your ancestry. 2 options: human or singer. Singer, that's interesting. Okay, so this book definitely, I think the RPG is basically post Oathbringer, which is book 3. So then paths are similar to classes. Oh, never mind. I was totally wrong. So paths are similar to classes, and you have one of 6 heroic paths: agent, envoy, hunter, leader, scholar, soldier. Well, okay. Totally whiffed on that. I thought they were going to be tied to the specific radiant powers. Attributes: strength, speed, intellect, willpower, awareness, presence. Yep, the 6. Ooh, but we have 3 defenses. We have physical, cognitive, and spiritual defense. Your resilience against attacks, coercion, and other unwanted effects. I guess is like, if you had to create a comparison, it'd be passive. It would be your AC, your passive intelligence, and your passive wisdom. But I've never seen passive and just intelligence, passive wisdom used ever. Passive perception is really the only ever passive thing I've ever seen really used. So that's cool. I like there being multiple defenses, and I'm assuming that in combat, abilities that aren't tied to specific weapons might be doing like target different defenses. So you have resources. Your health protects you from injury or death. Your focus is a mental resource you spend to activate certain talents and reactions. Radiant characters gain a 3rd resource, investiture, which powers their search body. Oh, okay. So we're gonna have non-radiant PCs. Cool. Okay. I don't know how you balance that. It'd be like putting a cleric without any of the actual like magic. So remove spell casting from a cleric. It'd be like putting a cleric next to the Flash. Like, how do you balance between those 2? That's really interesting. So then each resource also has a maximum. Yep. Deflect value represents your resilience to damage. When you take energy, impact, or keen damage, reduce the damage by your deflect value. So you not only have a physical defense, but you also have an innate deflect value. So you have the physical defense, which is, I'm assuming, the DC someone needs to hit on their test to even see if they succeed in rolling damage. And then you have essentially damage resistance that would reduce the amount of incoming damage. I wonder what 8 HP is like. Like, are we looking at like 5e amounts of HP, or are we talking like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for everybody at level 1? You have skills. They're the heart of your character sheet and the statistic you'll reference most often. Your modifier for each skill is equal to that skill's relevant attribute plus your ranks in that skill. Ooh, okay, so we've got multiple ranks and skills, and apparently we are rolling skills way more than just generic attributes. Love. Okay, here we go. Example character sheet. Man, lifting capacity, that is a priority spot. This section up here at the top is giving pretty strong Pathfinder 2e vibes with the multiple defenses. And I know that that's like an old D20 thing from both 3.5, 3 Pathfinder. I'm just talking on my butt here. Physical, strength, defense, speed, cognitive. Oh, cool. Okay, so they grouped the attributes into physical, cognitive, and spiritual, which they are, but 5e doesn't actually do anything with that grouping, and like it's not an explicit thing. So then next to each of the 2 attributes, you have a defense for each of those 3 kind of pairings. And then underneath physical, you've got health and a deflect value. Under cognitive, you got your focus, and under spiritual, you've got investiture. I love that. Very cool solve. And then here's all our skills. And ooh, 5 ranks. And you know what I don't see anywhere on this sheet, gang? I don't see fucking proficiency. Hell yes. Things we love to see. And so we have some derived stats like movement rate, lifting capacity, recovery die. Okay, interesting. The census thing is so specific. That's like, whoa, can't believe we're... Can't believe we're going that far. We've got expertise. Your character has so we have conditions and injuries. Injuries, love. Several areas of expertise, specialized knowledge from personal experience. You might have intricate knowledge of one kind of weapon, years of learning about an academic subject, or deep familiarity with a given culture. Where was that on the sheet? Expertise is okay, just kind of open text box. What's a skill? Leadership as a skill. Lore. Okay, so there's a lore skill that maybe when rolling a lore check related to one of your expertises, you get some kind of bonus. I'm guessing. Weapons, talent, special capabilities. Some provide ongoing effects, passives, access to new actions. Every path you take provides access to new sets of talents. Armored equipment, spheres, which is the currency. Also, in your narrative hooks. Characters' narrative hooks don't directly affect your stats or dice you roll, but provide RP guidance, ultimately drive some of the most important decisions making in the game. Purpose is your core need. You can't help but act on it, embody it. And if you nurture your purpose, it can become your greatest strength. It is intrinsic to your character, unchanging, unless your character goes through a major crisis or epiphany, where you have an obstacle persistently gets in the way of fulfilling your purpose or pursuing your goals. It can be a lifelong trait or something that emerged from your past. Love that. Each character also has tangible objectives they are working toward called goals. During each adventure, you have a chance to mark progress towards your goals. Resolving a goal can unlock rewards that give your characters access to special items, titles, and more. You then have connections, which are one of the most important rewards you'll unlock. Connection might be a loyal companion, an organization that acts as your patron, or even a spren with whom you have a deep spiritual bond. Spren are I've stayed spoiler free. I won't say anything. I really, really, really like games that create mechanic systems around these types of things. It's a kind of thing that I think does mean that the character creation at the table is more involved, which is never a bad thing. Unless you're playing like a pickup public game. It's kind of like the one instance I can kind of think of. Especially if, depending on how things are generated, you might not want to like, you want to do character creation at the table. You don't want someone to show up with a like just a already made character sheet. Some of that can go away. Like some people in some tables or some systems, none of that would be a problem. But in 5e, especially like long campaigns, you want players to come in with that stuff already determined. And it's some players do it by default. Like that's part of character creation for them. When they make a character, they come up with something like a purpose or an obstacle, even if it isn't spelled out. Things like 5e or Pathfinder. But they do make the GM's life a lot easier. And so it's one of my common kind of frustrations as a GM when running a long game is, you know, we've been playing as a single character for X, you know, a year plus, and me as the GM, we're in between story arcs. I'm trying to mine my characters for hooks to be able to use and explore, and I ask a player who's been playing this character for over a year, hey, what's something that your character wants to accomplish, and like what's a goal of theirs, what are they pursuing? Like, I don't know, they're just having fun, they enjoy being with this group of people and kind of doing this thing. I was like, ugh, I get it, but it's frustrating to deal with sometimes. And I like just codifying that. Like some people might find it restrictive, but I think for a huge majority of people, just having a purpose, an obstacle, and some goals right there in your character sheet makes RP easier because you've already kind of pre-made a decision, right? You pre-made what an obstacle your character is always having to put up with. And so like you get into a situation where you don't know how to behave. Well, like what's your purpose and what's your obstacle? Like those generally will get you pretty far into the like in character decision making process. All right, let's figure out our attributes. Attribute scores, yes. Interesting. Okay, never mind. Most humans and singers, which is the non-human species on Roshar, they don't have attributes above 2, but PCs are extraordinary even at first level, and as you gain levels, you can increase your attribute scores to as high as 5. Okay, so we've basically gone away with the 0 to 20 D&D attributes that then become modifiers. And even then it's like well, it says most don't have attributes above 2. You would imagine that the average person is probably -1, 0, 1 on their attributes if you were going to stat block them. So going as 5 is where, without the access to magic items or other super special character abilities that would allow an attribute to go higher than 5. That's what an attribute modifier would be in 5e. So simplifying it, it's perfect. This range can increase even further for some singer forms, radiant characters, massive beasts, and other powerful creatures. See, okay, so I wonder earlier when I kind of realized that we're going to have non-radiant characters. I wonder if the other option is a singer's form. That, like, if you're playing a human PC, that you are radiant. The other option is if you are a singer and not radiant, you have access to singer forms. And that's how you balance. Because I was like, how do you just take a soldier off the street, or you're like off the Shattered Plains, and try to balance him with a Surge Binding Radiant? You can't. We have strength. Strength will determine your lifting and capacity. I'm trying to see, like, you aren't expected to track exactly how much you're carrying at all times. Just be reasonable. Carrying capacity represents how much weight you can comfortably carry while walking. You can temporarily exceed this weight, but it'll slow you down and eventually exhaust you. Every time you exceed your carrying capacity for a cumulative period of 60 minutes, you become exhausted. Fine. I would probably never use those rules, but it's one of those areas that I feel like game designers feel like they have to get explicit with. So you have speed, then oh, gotcha. Okay, so literally, if your strength is a 2, you can lift 200 pounds and carry 100 pounds. If your speed attribute is a 3, you can move 30 feet per action. Cool. I like that. If you need to determine your movement rate outside of combat, you can perform around 3 actions every 10 seconds. So we're at 10-second rounds instead of 6. So it is, which of course makes more sense. It's just easier to kind of figure out. But so we're doing 6 rounds in a minute as opposed to 10 rounds in a minute. Though, like, yeah, never mind. Intellect. Character creation. Characters can choose 2 cultural expertises. You also gain additional expertises equal to your intellect score. Love that. I think that's similar to Pathfinder. Maybe it's an additional skill that you're trained in. Yeah, additional skill that you're trained in above a certain intelligence modifier. Willpower, your cognitive resilience, ability to enact your will on others and resistance to outside influences. Your recovery die determines how efficiently you recover health and focus when you stop to take a break. And your willpower determines the size of your recovery die. Whoa, interesting. So recovery die is like, what do you call it in 5e? Hit point die, hit dice. Removing that, 5e is a class determined feature. This is actually representative of your willpower. I love that there are these, every attribute is has some kind of derived thing. So like they all seem important. So your awareness score determines how far your senses kind of go, which is going to be kind of interesting to kind of extrapolate, I think. And then presence is establishing connections. Cool. Oh, sweet. So the higher presence, the less time in game it takes for you to establish a connection with someone. That's cool. I just realized that there's still 6 attributes, but there is no constitution. So strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and then awareness. Willpower is, oh, I guess willpower is basically constitution, your determination and mental fortitude. But the fact that it is, there's a big spin on it. It's not just how hardy you are, how big, physically imposing you are. So splitting out the determination, mental fortitude into its own thing to replace constitution, and then leaving some of the wisdom stuff tied to awareness and perception. It's a good split. I like that. And I've seen other D20 games play around with the 6 attributes and try to make wisdom important, basically. Or make charisma mechanized, create a system for high charisma that isn't just high persuasion or deception rolls. I'm a big fan of this. So you then have defenses, which we saw in the character sheet: physical, cognitive, and spiritual defense. When someone's attempting a skill test against you, they're usually testing against your defense from the same category as their skill, unless specified by the effect. So, for example, persuasion is a presence-based skill, so it targets a character's spiritual defense. That's so easy. That's great. Like, it all feels extremely familiar to players who've been playing D20 games, or, most of your audience is coming from 5e. So it's going to feel really familiar, but it's just kind of creating something explicit that was kind of implied or not really extrapolated in a meaningful way in the 5e rules. We're creating, like, instead of always defaulting to opposing rolls, defaulting to a defense and difficulty class, but making it explicit and more understood and obvious to a player. I kind of had this realization, welcome to one of Zach's tangents. I had this realization in my last session that I was running, my 5e campaign, that I default to opposing roles in situations where there are actually explicit DCs spelled out, but they are not obvious, and I don't play with the GM screen, and it's not something that comes up every once in a while. An opposing role is just so easy to just default to when I don't immediately know the answer. When in reality, there are some DCs out there. The problem is that the DCs in 5e are, I never know, does the DC calculation start at 8 or 10? Should I include their proficiency bonus in it? What is their proficiency bonus right now? Like, is it worthwhile? Doesn't matter. And so Cosmere getting rid of proficiency bonus, huge win. The organization of their attributes and kind of restructuring constitution, and now there being important, or a player will find 1, if not 2, derived stats from their attributes that are very important to them, making all 6 worthwhile. And there being some legitimate sacrifice to dump stats. Super exciting. And then just the idea of these straightforward defenses / DCs for seemingly most, if not almost all, tests to speed up the game, less swingy results because of an over reliance on opposed rolls. Very cool. Big fan. Let's see. However, especially when testing against other characters' defenses, beware that defenses might not be the only factors affecting your DC, as described in the upcoming skill section. Okay. That seemed like almost interpersonal, but I wonder if other characters mean NPCs. Like when they don't specify players, so maybe they do mean that. Okay. So you then have health, focus, and investiture. Yep. So you're okay. So your maximum health is 10 plus your strength, plus any bonuses or penalties. There are damage, injury, and death rules based on maybe how much health you have left compared to your max, or how much you've lost compared to your max. It's interesting. Health is reduced to 0. That represents suffering a more critical blow that knocks you out of the fight. So when you're reduced to 0, you suffer an injury and you become unconscious, and you run the risk of incurring more serious injuries. You can partially recover health during a short rest, and you recover all of your health during a long rest. Cool. So 0 in this game, I kind of like that. Like it immediately tells you the tone of these stories this game is anticipating, saying, like, telling that, like, you aren't just dead when you hit 0. But you do suffer some kind of permanent affect in an injury. And we'll see what death looks like. Is it a player opt-in situation? Is there similar kind of death saving throws to let the dice kind of tell the story? Is there if there is saving throws when you hit 0, is the DC for those? Oh, I haven't even seen saves. Why would you? Sorry, it's another domino that I think I understood, but I needed to connect the dots. The fact that almost everything has a difficulty class means that instead of someone like the PC rolling the dex save, or the GM rolling a dex save, the attacker or the instigator is always rolling against a generally static DC. I think 5e intentionally tries to give as many opportunities for rolling on the players as possible, like feeling like that is the player interacting with the game. We need to give them the chance to roll. So, like, we're gonna create these saving throw type things, but then it works two ways. So maybe that's not necessarily like the thought process there. It might just be vestigial from, older things. But there's nothing here about saves, because the instigator is always rolling to hit against against some kind of defense or difficulty class that is, even when you're affecting someone's cognitive, which would normally be something like an intelligence or wisdom save in 5e, you're now just trying to beat their cognitive defense. God, that's so good. Love it. All right, so we then have focus, which is our cognitive resource. Maximum focus is 2 plus your willpower plus any bonuses and penalties. I wonder, once we get the paths, we can see the type of bonuses or penalties that might. I would love for the soldier by default to see a substantive boost, a substantive bonus to health, where a scholar should probably have a penalty to health. Flip that for focus. We then have investiture, which is a spiritual resource representing your ability to hold and channel investiture, the energy that suffuses the Cosmere. On Roshar, this represents your ability to breathe in and hold Stormlight. New characters don't have investiture, but if you later choose a radiant path, You'll gain an investiture pool that works much like your focus does. Okay, so I'm super interested. It seems like, I wonder if radiant paths are almost like prestige classes where you start at level 1. Everybody at level 1 is non-radiant and you are on a path, and then all of a sudden at a certain level, at a certain level, you go from this like non-radiant kind of more non-radiant path to a radiant path, and maybe the radiant paths available to you are kind of determined by the initial path that you chose. Like if you're playing an intellect focused path like a scholar, the scholar has eventually, if you can become radiant, there are certain radiant paths that you as a scholar can choose from. Interesting. Cool. And then deflect. When an enemy succeeds on an attack against you, the damage from that attack generally reduces your health. However, armor or other effects can grant you a deflect value. So it's not cool. So I wonder if armor, I'm sure there are different armors that have different bonuses to your physical defense and different deflect values. And then maybe there are, for cognitive and spiritual, probably not, maybe items, but probably more abilities provide some kind of static bonus to deflect or cognitive and spiritual defenses. And then I have skills. You start the game with 18 skills. So you use skills when you attempt a task that has a chance of failure. We'll ask you to make a skill test. Also applies to NPCs in the GM. Sorry, my mic. Realizing I'm kind of staying out there in the middle. Usually don't need any ranks in a skill to test it, but your chance of success increases with your inherent aptitude. Everything you attempt during gameplay uses one of your skills, but there's often more than one way to accomplish a task. So depending on your approach, the environment, and other circumstances, the GM will let you know which skill test you should roll or give you a choice. Sweet. Love that. And just saying, like, everything's a skill. So no more generic, make a strength check for me. Like, nope, it's got to be a skill. Which then, in turn, most likely, the player's trained in and therefore gets a bonus and they're getting better at. Just ditching proficiency and providing skill ranks is such a huge win. Getting rid of saves and switching to multiple but static defenses with a straightforward calculation to determine. Huge win. Like, the base infrastructure for this game, like as a kind of a D20, a 5e-esque game, they're taking a lot of the things that I think certain parts of the 5e audience has not enjoyed over the past decade of 5e play, and I'm seeing some really smart changes. And I know Brandon probably did not actually set out to design the game. But I also know Brandon's a big nerd who I'm sure I know has played D&D. I don't know if he's played 5e much. So I wonder how much like he set out to be like, I want it to feel like this, or maybe he does play a bunch of 5e. Maybe he's on our D&D next. Maybe he's one of the sickos on our D&D Next trying to, rewrite different subsystems for 5e. And it was like, I don't want to roll saving throws anymore. Or I hate proficiency bonuses, get rid of them. So funny. So I'm making all that up. I have no clue. So all the skills are associated with an attribute. You can have anywhere from 0 to 5 ranks in a skill. Narratively, ranks indicate your character's education and lived experience. Your skill modifier equals your score in the skills associated attribute plus your number of ranks. So if you have 1 rank, you add a +1, 2 ranks, +2. Cool. I kind of hope, I like in Pathfinder 2nd edition, the skill ranks are named, going from like trained to expert to master to legendary, I think are the 4 skill ranks. I'm a fan of that, and I kind of hope they decide to go and name those, but I understand if they don't, like, especially because it would clog up the character sheet. So you have difficulty class with the DCs, the like target you're trying to meet or succeed. Binary success, which is like, we knew that was going to be a thing. It's a D20 game. Binary, you succeeded or failed. There is no like stratification of stuff. I mean, the stratification is coming from the plot die, the opportunities and complications, and the fact that you can get those by rolling natural 20s or natural 1s or increasing the opportunity range or the complication range. So we're more than 5e. That's what I'll say. So we have some things with a set DC, like using the field medicine talent to treat a wounded ally it's a DC 15 medicine test as stated in the talent test. Sweet. Defense is basically the test to determine like the skill tests DC. Yep. Typically the defense in the same categories as skill being used. For example, if you're threatening someone, you usually test intimidation against their cognitive defense. However, the GM or certain rules may occasionally have you use different defenses. For example, the feigning strike talent lets you make an attack against a target's cognitive defense instead of their physical defense. Love it. Honestly, it feels like a really simple subsystem change on the D20 chassis, but feels like it opens up a lot of cool interactions that we don't really see, or there's just needless text and explainers on a 5e ability to achieve similar goals, basically. And then adjusting DCs. The relevant defense's values set the base DC for that skill set, but the GM might further modify it based on other circumstances. For example, if a character is particularly friendly to you, might lower the DC for persuading them. Perhaps they have a spiritual defense of 11, but you only need an 11 to convince them. Or if they're in high alert, it might be harder to pick their pocket. The DC doesn't necessarily have to tell you when something is modifying a character's defense to use caution. Yeah. Yeah. Standard difficulty class examples. I like when a system is more, and maybe it's in the GM chapter, which I've not gotten to, but I hope there's some actually like explicit spelled out ways to adjust the DCs that are kind of set as opposed to just kind of like winging it. This is one of those areas where I feel like specificity makes the GM's life easier, even if it means there's a table that you need to put on your GM screen to reference until you kind of have it memorized and learned. I think that kind of specificity just removes some mental strain from the GM. And I'm not saying everything should be on the players. It shouldn't. Like, part of the fun for me as a GM is the improvisation in both the rule set and the actual like portrayal of the world's results. But when there's opportunities to relieve some of that mental load on a GM, for instance, just stating it's a -1 or a -2 or a +1 or a +2 to adjust DCs would be good. Like the jump from 14 to 11, because they are particularly friendly to you, like a -3 seems kind of drastic. Like that's the equivalent of having 3 ranks out of 5 in a skill, which I would imagine wouldn't necessarily be possible until at least past level 10, I would imagine, which seems like a big swing. So just having those kind of things spelled out, I hope is in the GM rules, or if it's not in this doc, I hope it's in the final rule set. We then have a post test. Occasionally actively want to make tests against each other, such as a wrestling match. Or similarly, one character's skill in completing a task would reasonably set the DC for a later attempt to subvert that skill. Yeah. For example, if a windrunner uses the adhesion surge to lash an object to the ceiling, then you try to pry it off the ceiling, you test athletics against their adhesion. That sentence right there sounded like absolute word salad. If you if you have not read past like at least past Words of Radiance, that's going to be an interesting. I mean, playing in IP specific TTRPGs always has a higher barrier of entry than like kitchen sink, easily understood generic settings. Like even just jumping into a D&D game, everybody kind of anticipates that the DM is doing some level of world explanation for you, but like the default for that D&D world is pretty consistent. And you know, if you know enough to walk in and like be willing to like play D&D, you kind of have a gut understanding, base understanding of what the D&D setting is going to be like, even if you're not playing in the Forgotten Realms. Especially if you're not playing in the Forgotten Realms, like some things are just baked in to the genre. Knowing that someone is going to need the Stormlight magic quote unquote system explained in order to play the Cosmere RPG is not a small task. And listen, if you're picking up the Cosmere RPG, you're not doing it just with 0 exposure, but like I can imagine if like a GM is really excited to play the Cosmere and maybe a couple of the other players have read Stormlight, but a couple players haven't, getting them, your friends are going to be excited to tell you about it. But it is going to be like Windrunner, Adhesion, Surge, Lash. What? It's like so funny. We'll see what happens. I mean, the Kickstarter was incredibly popular. So now we just have to see like what is can the popularity of the book series sustain a healthy community for the TTRPG? I have no doubt. I think it'll be fine. But I feel similarly about Critical Role's upcoming TTRPG, Daggerheart. I think that comes out in like a couple months. And it's like, Critical Role's really popular. Like, I'm sure their pre-orders were great. Like the beta made waves in like our little niche community of TTRPG, people who are aware of more than just Dungeons and Dragons, and actively aren't participating in the Critical Role community. But I wonder if there's enough in it to sustain popularity after the initial hype. Like, will it continue to be supported in 3 years? 5 years? I don't know. We'll see. It seems like Cosmere, unless something really drastically happens to the fandom, it feels like it doesn't need a lot. And it seems like the Kickstarter or the crowdfunding was so successful, they've already got the roadmap for the next 2 years. You're going to get a setting book and a rule book and an adventure for Roshar, this book, Stormlight, and then next year for Mistborn, which are his 2 most popular Cosmere book series. And after that, like, do you need that much more? Probably not. Like, there might not need to be that much more resources invested in it for there to just be like, here you go. Hope you guys have fun. We will release a supplement when we'll release an Era 2 Mistborn supplement, or maybe they do another crowdfunding for Mistborn Era 2, and then maybe they do another crowdfunding for whenever in a decade, whenever book 6 of Stormlight comes out, to like whatever happens to kind of move the story meta of the world progression. But and not that those are small undertakings, but it's not like even Paizo levels, where for Pathfinder 2nd edition in the past 5 years they released like 4 or 5 totally new rule books, plus setting books, plus monthly adventure path modules, and then did a remastered version of the edition, and are like continuing to release new rule books and new classes for that remastered edition. So it's like, I don't think we're going to see like it. This won't need that level of investment, I don't think. Sorry, back to opposed tests. All that that's fine, but I like it. My initial reading when reading through this earlier stuff is that like really it's skill against DC, and these opposed tests need to be in really specific situations, and shouldn't be the default. And I already kind of talked about how I've found myself prone to defaulting to opposed rolls in my 5e campaign, and I need to. I don't think the system necessarily supports moving away from that very well, but I would like to stop depending on opposed rolls as often. It's less swingy. There's more chances for things happening, I think, with DCs, especially if the GM is public with the DC and the players can kind of anticipate how to affect their test to give themselves chances for success. Yep. So we then have advantage and disadvantage, which is disappointing. I think you could easily have a good game and not do advantage and disadvantage. I already kind of mentioned that when talking about opportunities and complications. It's an overpowered, very swingy resolution mechanic. And the fact that you can gain I think players will be hard pressed to find situations where giving an ally advantage with their opportunity is not the most optimal choice. Yep. That's what I'll say, I guess. Affecting multiple targets. Some abilities instruct you to make a single test against multiple targets. However, you might have advantage or disadvantage against only some of those targets. In that case, first roll the test without those extra dice. Then roll the dice for your advantages or disadvantages separately, applying them only to the results for the affected targets and ignoring others. Ew. That's gross. I guess that's a domino of like not doing saves. Is like saves do often in 5e are coming from AoE abilities, multiple enemy targets in a single ability. And so putting the onus on the instigator to always roll to hit against one of their defenses does mean that, like, in those weird situations where you've got advantage and disadvantage discrepancies, having to roll for each is kind of sucks. But there's no silver bullet solution to that other than just saying consolidating and saying count the amount of targets that you have advantage against, count up the targets you have disadvantage against, and then if it's, if there's more advantage than disadvantage, just roll with advantage. Like, you could simplify it a little bit more, but then that's even swingier, even more impactful of a mechanic. But that sucks. That's not fun to play or to do. Enemy NPC tests. If an enemy NPC is making a test with advantages or disadvantages, the roles of the GM. Yep. Oh, here we go. Okay. Hey, degree of success and failure. Hello. Okay. So we have varied test results. On a basic level, your DC and test results determine whether you succeed or fail. However, most situations are narratively much more complicated and interesting than that. Yes, they are. Thank you. To help you, your fellow players, and the GM tell the story together, this game provides additional tools to narrate more interesting outcomes from tests. Hell yes. Things you love to see. It. Degrees of success and failure in TTRPGs is only a boon. Very rarely can I think of like an entire game system benefiting from only having a binary resolution mechanic. True or false, 1 or 0, on, off, success, fail, and that's it. That sucks. Sorry, having some reflux. Chewing a tum. Even thinking of crits, like in combat, I do love the math doesn't match up. You couldn't just steal this and put it in your 5e game. I mean, you could, but the math is weird. Pathfinder 2nd Edition's like, you don't just roll a crit when you roll a natural 20. You score a crit if your to hit was 10 or more than their AC, I think is the rule. Or it ups the degree of success, is what I should say. Or, no, it's a crit if you succeed more than 10, of course you're succeeding. And then if you also rolled a natural 20, it further increases the success. Anyway, let's read this one instead of talking about a different system. So, degree of success and failure. While the DC sets a specific success-failure threshold, test results can run a wide range of values. The difference between the test result and the DC can inspire more detailed descriptions. In cases where the test results very close to the DC, you have a low degree of success or failure. You might describe your characters just barely succeeding or getting incredibly close but failing at the last second. On the other hand, if your test results far above or below the DC, you have a high degree of success or failure. You might describe your character catastrophically failing a test or expertly overcoming it. Oh, never mind. I thought we actually had a degree of success subsystem here. We don't. It's just narrative, like it's just describing in the narrative the difference between rolling a 15 on a DC 14 versus a DC, like rolling a 25 on a DC 15. There is no actual mechanical benefit. Though I wonder if there's an opportunity for like providing an opportunity at when you succeed over a certain threshold. I mean, I would be happy to hand out opportunities left, right, and center if it didn't involve just automatically providing advantage. But advantage is so swingy and it's so hard to balance against. It's like I would still use the plot die and opportunities as much as I possibly could because that's part of the fun of the system. But it does make me think twice. But if it was just like, if an opportunity instead of advantage, if it was just a +5 or a +6 bonus to the roll, I was like, cool. I'd do that all the time. And that seems like mathematically about right, because I think the complications themselves also come with a +2 or a +4 bonus to the roll, the test roll, depending on what like number on the plot die you rolled. So I'm complaining. When rolling the plot die, you commonly get a mix of good and bad, either succeeding with a complication or failing with an opportunity. These results contribute to a compelling narrative, progressing your story while introducing interesting twists or new ways forward. The upcoming sections for each skill include examples of how opportunities and complications may impact. Okay, these are just examples of how these would go. I'll probably skip around these. I won't read them all. Occasionally, you roll a success with an opportunity or a failure with a complication, especially when you roll a natural 1 or 20. These are the highest highs and lowest lows. These can be good moments to pivot the action to other characters, using your momentum to help others or giving someone else a chance to step in after your failure. Okay. Trying again. Yeah. Usually, when you try again, potential risks might simply be narrative, or the GM may include mechanical effects like losing focus, losing health, or raising the stakes and risking a complication. Ooh, I like those. Hey, look, this is what I'm talking about. Just give the GM some mechanical levers to pull on. And I wish they had done that with degree of success or failure. Just give the GM a little something explicitly to do that isn't just narrative description. Higher, like we're talking about mental load on the GM. These are easy things a game system can do to empower the GM to be the best storyteller they can be. And sometimes being the best storyteller they can be means not having to create benefits or consequences out of thin air on the fly every single time. Having a short table, a short list of options that can be known ahead of time. And obviously, if something makes sense and jumps out, the GM has the flexibility to do something off the cuff, free form, but like nothing immediately jumps out. And I don't want to sit here and like spend 90 seconds thinking through a consequence because you happened to roll a consequence on the plot die. I guess the benefit with this system is that when to roll the plot die is up to the GM. So in an ideal world, the GM is only raising the stakes and having the player roll the plot die with their skill test when there is an obvious consequence that could happen narratively. Or at least gives you a second to think about it. But like in those moments where someone rolls a natural 1, giving some handholds. It's always nice. Working together. When you work with others to attempt a test together, you don't all make separate tests. Rather, whoever's leading the effort makes one test, and they get an advantage for every character helping them. You often choose the leader based on who has the best skill modifier. Though in some situations, you might not have a choice. Assisting allies in combat can be challenging as every second matters. So if you want to help in combat, you must use the aid reaction or hope you roll an opportunity. GM may ask you to describe exactly how you're contributing to a test. Characters can only help with tests they could reasonably complete themselves. For example, a character can't assist with a task that requires an expertise or tools they don't have. Additionally, if the task requires physical contributions, each character helping must be able to reach and contribute to the task. Yep. But advantage for every person helping. What is like? Is that adding additional d20 beyond just the first, and then you're still taking the higher? Lord have mercy. Again, I thought most of my gripes are coming down to my classic gripes, which I knew was going to be here since it's a D20 framework game, a scaffold. I've been pleasantly surprised by things they've gotten rid of, and maybe asking for them to get rid of advantage and disadvantage too much, which I understand. Some abilities let you change a dice size. Yeah, it doesn't refer to physical measurements. Okay, I know how that works. Targeting from a distance. Yep. Agility, speed reflects your capacity to maneuver within your environment. Oh, okay. So these headers are not obvious, but yes. Okay, so we've moved from generic whatever I'm reading to now these are the examples. So we have agility, speed, athletics, strength, crafting, intellect. Full item crafting rules do not appear in this beta rules preview. I wouldn't expect them to. That's fine. But the fact that they exist is cool. Deception. Yep. Discipline. Willpower. Heavy weapons. Love. This is great. Heavy versus light. Weapons that use a skill tend to have a greater reach and heft than light weaponry, increasing their lethality but reducing maneuverability and precision. The creative maneuvers section of part 5 suggests creative ways you might fight with your heavy weapon. Sweet. Insight, intimidation, leadership. I'll admit I was taking in the character sheet earlier, but I did not go through each skill one by one. Leadership, inspire people, draw attention, or command allies when you appeal to someone's better nature or sense of right and wrong. Test leadership. You can also use this skill to delegate tasks, manage a crowd, bait an enemy, or direct allies who aren't strictly under your command. Cool. Light weapons, using speed. Lore, intellect. Lore and, okay, yeah, here's lore and expertise. Here, how these work. In addition to the general lore skill, your expertises, fun word to say, represent areas of specific knowledge. If you want to recall basic information relating to an expertise of yours, the GM should generally give you the information without a test. By contrast, if you want to know secret, forbidden, or otherwise obscure knowledge about a subject, you might have to test even if you have an expertise. If you succeed on a test to recall such hidden knowledge, but you don't have the hidden or the relevant expertise, you might not know all the key details required to have the full picture. Okay. There's apparently an upcoming expertises section, which I want to look out for. So then medicine, which is an intellect skill. Great. As it should be. Looking at you, medicine/wisdom in 5e. Using medicine in combat. If you have at least one rank in medicine, you can spend 2 focus and use a skill, which is apparently an action you can take. Or a reaction, I guess. To make a DC 15 medicine test to treat a conscious ally within your reach. Or you can make the same test with a disadvantage to treat yourself. On success, they recover health equal to your ranks in medicine. Ooh. Love that. Love, love, love. Super cool. And then using medicine while resting. During a long rest, you can make a DC 20 medicine test to treat an ally's injury. Or make the same test with a disadvantage to treat yourself. On a success, the duration of a shallow or vicious injury is reduced by 1d4 days. Excuse me. And once a character's been treated in this way, either successfully or unsuccessfully, they can't be treated that way again during the long rest. Love that. Super cool. We have perception. We then have persuasion. We have stealth, which is tied to speed. In combat, you can use a skill to attempt to hide from a character making a stealth test against their spiritual defense. Loving these rolls against static DCs. Not sarcastic. Honest. You can only hide if you're in cover, or if you're in an area where the target's primary sense is obscured, or if your target has no line of sight to you. If you're attempting to hide from more than one character, compare your test result to each character's spiritual defense. Each character who you succeed against loses track of you, can no longer sense you. They remain unaware of your exact location until you attack or take another action that would logically expose your position. As one action, I think that symbol is. You can covertly signal one or more allies you can sense, revealing your position to them. And then a character searching for you can use a skill to make a perception test to search for you, and the DC equals your spiritual defense. Gains disadvantage if you're in cover. I mean, stealth is always complicated. I think they did the right thing by not introducing conditions. Like, I will admit, like, the Pathfinder 2nd edition rules around stealth and all the different conditions that it applies based on the situation and where people are and what kind of cover you're behind is all super complicated and takes a second to kind of manage. It does feel like this is one of those areas where it is kind of like, I see the benefit in not creating super strict prescriptive subsystems for it. That said, gaining disadvantage if you're in cover, that shouldn't be disadvantage. There should just be like a penalty, like a flat penalty to the roll. That's all I have to say about that. Survival awareness includes some foraging rules. Cool. We have thievery, which is speed, pickpocketing in combat. Really? You use a skill to make a thievery test to pick the pocket of a character within your reach. When you make the test, raise the stakes. Okay, so there's the con, there's the balancing. If you want to try it, the rules say you can absolutely do it, but you got to raise it. You're raising the stakes every time. And then the DC of the test equals their cognitive defense, and you gain disadvantage if they're aware of your presence. Yeah, that makes sense. Then so your senses determine how you perceive and interact with the world. I like that they're not like, it's very cool of them to where this is a sense thing and not a sight thing. Both cool world building, lots of possibilities, but also just shout out like creating, structuring your subsystem in a way where someone who is differently abled is not immediately just fighting against the very nature of the subsystem just to exist, which is nice. And zero impact on a majority of players and their PCs. It's assumed that all characters can sense things from a reasonable distance at the GM's discretion. However, when your primary senses are entirely obscured, this limits how far away you can detect things. Depending on your primary sense, it could be obscured by the roaring cacophony of a high storm, the pitch black during the hateful hour of night when no moons are visible, and so on. Your senses range determines how far away you can easily sense. When your primary sense is obscured, then it's your awareness score determines the range. I love that. That's really straightforward, but immediately accommodates for all kinds of senses. And it's really just like, listen, be smart. Like, you can see however far you need to see, and however, like, we're not going to be prescriptive on how far away you need to be to read that street sign. But we're only going to bring in specific sense ranges when your main sense can't do its normal thing. I think that's great. Very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very elegant, simple solution to a problem most people didn't realize was a problem, which is perfect, the ideal. Targeting without senses. If you can't detect something without your summoning, it's hard to affect it with your abilities. For example, if an ability targets a character you can sense, but your senses are obscured, you can't target anyone outside of your senses range. Tight. Makes sense. Sensing hidden characters, objects. You can't automatically see through any kind of deception. If an illusion designed to trick you is obscuring an object, or an object is purposefully hidden from your ability to sense it, such as with a stealth skill, you must succeed on the usual skill test to spot it. Cool. Oh, and they have a specific little section on disabilities. If you usually rely on a sense and suddenly lose it, this can disrupt your perception of the world. For example, if you rely on sight but someone throws crem in your eyes, you might temporarily gain the disoriented condition. However, if you're accustomed to having limited access to one or more senses, such as with some disabled characters, you already rely on other senses to interact with your surroundings. If you create a disabled character who is adapted to other senses, you can make perception tests and all tests the same as an abled character. However, if you'd like that disability to affect not only your story but also the game's rules, work with your GM to decide when your limited senses might make some tests impossible, impose a disadvantage on others, or even grant an advantage when it reflects your practice with other senses. Easy accommodation. So easy. Love that. Expertise. Each character has unique areas of knowledge acquired through their upbringing, training, interests, and other life experiences. When your character specializes in a particular area, you gain an expertise on the topic. Yes. Each character starts with 2 cultural expertises, described in much more detail in the handbook. Totally fine. Plus additional expertises. And you gain additional expertises each time your intellect score increases by 1. You might also gain expertises from other character creation choices. Unlike attributes, defenses, skills, there isn't a finite list of expertises. Each expertise names a general area of knowledge, but it's up to you on how your character gained it and what knowledge it confers. One character with the military life expertise could be a singer who served in Odium's forces, while another could be a human who absorbed their knowledge of warfare through being raised in the yeah. They share the same expertise, but knowledge would be drastically different. Yep. When choosing expertise, consider what cultures, weapons, and armor, areas of study. Yep. The expertise category section provides examples. Sweet. The more specific an expertise, the greater its narrative impact. For example, if your character has the religion expertise, you have general knowledge of all Rosharan religions, but you might need to test lore to recur obscure details about stone shamanism. But if you picked an expertise in stone shamanism, it won't help you with tests against foreignism, but you'll know much more. Yeah. This is similar to basically the lore skill, and like it's sub lore tests in Pathfinder 2e. And I know other systems do it too, but I really only have I would consider myself having degrees of skill at a small group of games, which is why I talk about 5e, 2d20, Pathfinder 2nd edition, and then to a lesser extent, things like Fate and Powered by the Apocalypse. So we do have some expertise benefit examples here. So you have some assumed knowledge that you wouldn't even have to test for. You have advanced thinking. Beyond your automatic knowledge of the basics, your depth in a particular subject allows you to attempt tests that would be impossible for other characters. For example, if your party wants to figure out how the enemy's intricate new fabrial works, only characters with the fabrial crafting expertise can make a deduction test to learn that information. Fair. Some specialized items can't be crafted without a special expertise. Most weapons and armor, along with a few other items, have expert traits. These traits gain additional benefits to characters with specified expertise. That's super cool. Love that. So like anybody can use this halberd, but if you happen to be trained or is it I guess levels of expertise in that specific item that you opt into, you get additional benefits. Super cool. Big fan of that. And then you have some known languages. Cool. Armor expertises, cultural expertises, specialist expertises, utility expertises, and weapon expertises. Very cool. We then have some items. How long have I been going for? Almost 2 hours. And I just finished part 2 of 7 parts. But one's adversaries. Items, I'm just going to do a quick look through here. So we have sphere values as the currency of the world. So we have a type of weapon, the skill you use when attacking with it, how much damage it does, the range, special rules through traits. You then have expert traits, its weight, and a standard price. You have main hand weapons and offhand. You have ammunition. You have melee weapons and ranged weapons. Looks like they're formatted. So you can use a melee weapon to attack a target within your reach. And then if the table lists a modifier after the melee weapon's range, increase your reach by that amount when attacking with that weapon. So melee +5. Nice. That's basically the 5e, the reach trait, right? Reach just gives you an additional 5 feet of reach. So it's just kind of removing an extra layer of having to look up what reach means. It's just telling you what it means. It means +5. Ranged weapons seem like they work similarly to 5e. Then we have weapon traits. Cumbersome. Your strength score must be equal to or greater than the number, or you have disadvantage. Dangerous. The GM can spend complications from an attack with this weapon to cause you to also accidentally graze an ally. Love that. Okay, here, this is what I want from opportunities and complications, is cool ways to spend them to do cool shit. So then also deadly weapons, you can spend an opportunity to immediately cause an injury. Yes. Defensive, you can brace. Very cool. I don't know what all the actions are. So, Sveth, Sun Volano. You were white on the day he was to kill a king. Discreet, indirect. Range weapon that can arc shots over cover and obscuring terrain. Nice. Loaded, so you have stored ammunition. As an action, one action, you can reload it to full, and the GM can spend a complication from an attack with that weapon to reduce the stored ammunition to only 1 shot remaining. Very cool. Love that. Momentum. Cool. You can give yourself advantage if you moved at least 10 feet in a straight line. Very cool. And you know what? I'll go ahead and put my hands up and say I've not looked into or read the like finalized 5e 2024 versions. I've heard things about how weapons became much cooler and had some additional effects or like more traits. And so I will throw my hands up and say like if things like momentum exist in 5e 2024 now, like that's great. I'm glad they both exist. I'm in the middle of a years long campaign using the 2014 rules, and I'm not going to migrate to 2024 and nerf. I have both a paladin and a druid using 2014 rules, at level, what level are they? 9. I'm not gonna nerf them. They need nerfs, to be clear. They need nerfs. But I'm not gonna do that in the middle of the campaign just to upgrade it 2024. Quick draw, you can use interact as a free action to draw the weapon. Tight. Ooh, pierce ignores deflect value. Very cool. Ooh, so it seems like attacking with a weapon in your offhand usually costs you 2, but if that weapon has the offhand trait, it only costs you 1. Nice. Thrown, two-handed, unique. This weapon has unique rules. You then have improvised weapons that can be fragile. Sick. Unarmed attacks. Yeah. Ooh, it's damage die dependent on your strength score. Love that. And you can also choose unarmed attack as a weapon as Pertice. Very cool. Then I have shard blades. These are super specific to Roshar and Stormlight. Well, I guess let me clarify. No spoilers, but the Cosmere, not just Roshar. Yeah, how are they handling that? So like kind of spoilery, but I want to know. Like, how do they mechanize the effect? Because yeah, the shard blades don't really interact with the physical world in normal ways. They cut cleanly through almost any non-living material. And then when they pass through living organisms, they don't leave like cuts or whatever, but they cut through the soul. So like if you swing through someone's arm with a shard blade, it doesn't cut the arm off, but like everything below where the shard blade went through the arm becomes basically just like unusable flesh. It like turns gray, and like they basically just lose the use of that limb. If this happens to a character's spine or head, the characters burn out, or their eyes burn out, and they instantly die. So you have to bond with the shard blade. You can then summon and dismiss it. It takes 10 heartbeats to summon. When you use the interact action to draw your shard blade, it does not materialize in your hand until the start of your next turn. Honestly, if the 10 heartbeats is from the books, if that is explicitly why they went from 6 second rounds to 10 second rounds, that is a good enough reason. Like, if they're like, we need to create some, like, we know in the world there's a penalty, a time waiting in order to summon your shard blade. So in instances where a shard bearer does not already have their shard blade summoned, there's a mechanical penalty to that. How do we match it up to the lore that was Brandon already established with it takes 10 heartbeats, not 10 seconds, not 10 heartbeats. What do we do? Well, what if we just made the round 6, instead of 6 seconds, be 10 seconds? Is that close enough? It is? Cool. Love that. I bet Shardblades probably targets spiritual defense instead of physical. Maybe. Spiritual injury. When a Shardblade causes a target to make an injury roll, either by dropping them to 0 health or triggering the deadly trait, you roll on the Shardblade injuries table to determine the injury instead of the main weapon. On a 16 plus, no lasting effects. On a 1 to 15, they suffer a spiritual injury and they suffer a permanent injury. No non-invested healing can recover this injury, and then they just die on a 0 or lower. So there must be some type of penalty on the injury roll. Maybe that's how death works. We haven't gotten there, but we're kind of getting a sneak peek here on the injury list. Okay, so here's the weapons. We have Keen and Impact. I guess Keen is kind of the same as like, instead of bludgeoning, slashing, piercing, we have Keen and Impact. Mace does Impact. Knife does Keen. Staff does impact. Short bow does keen. Long spear does keen. Hammer, impact. Longbow, keen. Yep. Cool. Okay, so some of the traits we were looking at earlier are only the expert traits. So things like, like an axe, it by default has thrown, but if you have axe expertise or some kind of weapon expertise, you then get access to it having the offhand trait, which then lets you only attack with it with only one focus required in the offhand. Sick. Oh, like longsword defaults to two-handed, but then if you have the expert trait, it loses two-handed. So cool. So then, and then you have, and so these are all light weapons that use that the light skill. Heavy, use the heavy skill. Special weapons. Shardblade is heavy. It does 2d8 spirit, which is a ton. Comparison, longsword, which is the two-handed sword weapon, does 1d8. Oh, greatsword does 1d10, and so does a hammer. So 2d8 is a lot more damage, but that's accurate. And Shardblades are supposed to be pretty unique. Well, not really, but you have to hit a certain level of radiant to be able to summon a Shardblade. It comes with dangerous, deadly, and unique. And then if you're an expert with a Shardblade, it loses dangerous. What does dangerous do? Oh, is that the one? Dangerous is the GM can spend complication to cause you to accidentally graze someone. So cool. We then have armor, type of armor, deflect value, and some traits and expert traits. Oh, what was this? The full Stormlight handbook includes other special weapons like Radiant Shard. Oh, is this different than a Radiant Shardblade? I guess it was. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Spoiler. Oops. So we have shard bows and shard hammers from later books, Fabrial shields. It also details one of the most iconic items, the magical armor shard plate. Okay, so we won't see shard plate in this. Okay. I'm okay with that. I understand. We have the cumbersome trait on armor, which requires a minimum stealth or a strength score. Dangerous. Oh. The GM can spend a complication from your tests when you're wearing this armor to cause an ally within 5 feet of you to take 2d6 impact damage as you injure them with your uncontrolled motion. Surely that is... Oh, here's armor. Okay, so I would imagine dangerous is going to be similar to the shard blade trait. It's going to be a shard plate trait that if you have expertise in it, you lose it. You lose the dangerous trait, which is the same way the shard blade works. Thinking of someone like, why am I all of a sudden drawing a blank? Adolin, who's been training with shard his entire mature life. Obviously, he should not have the opportunity for a complication to negatively impact his allies in either blade or plate. But as someone new who hasn't been trained with it, who just gets access to it all of a sudden, yeah, it's tight. Very cool. So deflect values starts at 0. Full plate is a 4. But cumbersome 5. So you have to have a strength score of 5 to even basically wear it. Sweet. We then have some equipment, enable you to do some stuff. We have Fabrials, which is kind of like Magitech in this setting. They're powered by Stormlight. Cool. venturing. Let's kind of go through this. So we have different kinds of scenes. So when the action zooms in and you have your individual actions of consequences, the scene is called a scene. Most of the game rules focus on scenes, as they typically need more guidance. Yeah. So you have combats, you have conversations. These could involve heated arguments, tense negotiations, intricate deceptions, much more. Part 6 includes guidance, cool, and endeavors. Highlight times you're trying to traverse, explore. Okay, so this is the 3 pillars. Combat. Exploration. What's the other one? I don't remember. Because I don't think I do not consider the 3 pillars not part of my thought process when running 5e. Splitting the party, transitions between scenes. Ooh, events. Sometimes the GM might introduce impending circumstances within scenes that count down to something occurring that will shake up the scene. These are called events. They can either be positive or negative and act as ticking clocks. Events are an optional tool that builds anticipation and adds dimension to any type of scene. Your GM might incorporate 2 or 3 events throughout a game session, either divvied up between sessions or in the same scene if the stakes are super high and a lot's happening at once. It's helpful to think of an event as similar to an opportunity or complication with a larger scope of impact, such as a high storm or the building outrage of a crowd at an unfair duel. Love that. Or for more, if you know word salad, the timer to Dalinar opening a perpendicularity to refuel your Stormlight during a massive battle. Got to read book 3 to understand what that sentence just was. When they introduce an event, they're foreshadowing something that's not yet in play, but likely will come to fruition. An event's triggered once a predetermined number of dedicated opportunities or complications fill its track. I love that. That's super cool. Yes. Big fan. I kind of love that. I really love that. That's super cool. And really only like possible because of the plot die. Like, yeah, you could, like, a natural 1 is going to generate a complication for it, but those don't happen with any kind of reliable consistency. You have a 5% chance of rolling it. So in scenes where I've prepped and want to use an event, I am anticipating there being lots of opportunities to raise the stakes. We haven't gotten into like combat situations specifically, so don't know if like raise the stakes is default to like striking someone or something like that. We have downtime. They're gonna have more downtime activities in the full rule book. Many effects can apply a condition to you. You become slowed. Yes. Conditions only apply to characters, not objects. Conditions you have afflicted slowly take damage over time. At the end of each of your turns, you take that amount and type of damage. Out of combat, you take that damage every 10 seconds, and after each time someone attempts to remove the condition. Ouchies. Determined. When you fail a test, you add an opportunity to the results. When you do, remove the determined condition. That's super cool. Not the type of condition I was anticipating, but very cool. Disoriented. You cannot use reactions. Your senses count as obscured at all times, and your perception tests gain disadvantage. Empowered. When a radiant swears an ideal, they become empowered, granting a burst of unrestrained power. You gain an advantage on all tests, and your investiture refills to your maximum at the start of each of your turns is removed at the end of the current scene. Such a very specific... the RPG is here to mechanize and provide an avenue for a radiant to swear an ideal. And I'm really looking forward to seeing when that is. Like, um it's such a character, like in the books, it's such an emotional development. Like it's this character maturity for all of the characters in the book, but it is a decision the character makes. So I'm interested to see how they gamify that in a way that players who know will feel similarly to how the characters in the book feel. And I mean, they talk about how like experience and like gaining more power in this game equates to emotionally maturing and like growing as a person. But I'm really interested to see how they handle that. While enhanced, one of your attributes is increased and can even stretch beyond normal limits. Unlike most conditions, enhanced has a cumulative effect, and you can have this condition for more than one attribute at a time. When you gain it, you gain the stated bonus to the specified attribute for all gameplay purposes, except for your defenses and resources. So like health, focuses, and investiture don't change. Those values don't change. For example, if you have a speed of 3 and become enhanced +2 speed, you gain the following benefits. +2 to your agility, light, weapon, stealth, and thievery skills, because those are the skills tied to your speed attribute. You increase your movement speed to 40 feet per action, and this is because on the table you went from 3 to 5, so that's the new range according to that. And then any add +2 to any talents that directly scale off your speed. A +2. Because I mean, it's big when you think about it, but compared, like, I'm getting frustrated with advantage and disadvantage again, where it just seems like that's a bigger swing. I think speed is an interesting when we're like, maybe the extra movement speed would be better. But I think I'd almost rather have advantage than a +2 bonus, which is like where, like, that's the like, it's why I don't enjoy that subsystem in any game, and why maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the math isn't as skewed towards gaining advantage that I think it is. But what makes it, like, my gut is that when you have advantage, you are doubling your chances of succeeding, where getting a +2, you're only increasing your chances by 10%. Does that sound right? The difference between, I mean, yeah, is it only a 10% increase compared to a 50% increase? Now, like, I mean, anything about rolling low or rolling high with advantage is the same rolling a single die, except you're literally doubling the chances of a roll being what you need. So if the enhanced feels like, if investing, if powering one of your radiant abilities with investiture gives you like enhanced +2 strength, I think that would be kind of disappointing, all in all, compared to the mechanical benefits of advantage and disadvantage. But I do kind of have it out for advantage and disadvantage. I acknowledge that I just genuinely really do not like that system, but that's why. So you have exhausted. It's a penalty to every test. Yep. It has a cumulative effect. So whenever you gain a second instance of this condition, if an effect makes you exhausted -3, subtract 2 from all tests. If a different effect then makes you exhausted -1, that increases your exhausted penalty, and you now subtract 3. Yeah, so you go from exhausted -2 to exhausted -3. Focused. Focus cost of abilities have their cost reduced by 1. It doesn't say to a minimum of 1. So if an ability had a focus cost of 1, it is now free. Love that. Immobilized. Movement rate 0. Prone. You're laying flat on the ground. You have to spend 5 feet of your movement to stand up to remove the condition. You are also slowed. Melee attacks against you gain an advantage. But since you are prone, you can use the brace action without a shield or cover. After you become prone, while climbing or flying, you fall and take damage. As usual. Strained, slowed, movement rates halved, and if you become slowed in the middle of movement, halve your remaining movement. Rounded up. Why? I mean, I get why, but it's almost kind of frustrating that this is the first time I've seen round up where there's a default. The default for the game is rolling or rounding down. So I wish they'd been consistent. Stunned. You gain 2 fewer single actions and you don't gain a reaction. Out of combat, you're overwhelmed, making you move and react slower to the situation at the GM's discretion. Sweet. Surprised, you don't gain a reaction at the start of combat, and you must take a slow turn and gain a slow turn, gaining 1 fewer action. I think that's how I'm supposed to read that. It doesn't say you are slowed. You must take a slow turn. I think slow turn meaning you gain 1 fewer action. I wonder if by default you get 2, but one of them will carry over, so you can have a max of 3. We haven't gotten to the actual combat rules yet, but that's what I'm guessing. Because at the beginning of the game in the introduction, they described having 2 or 3 actions and then a reaction to take on other people's turn. So I'm imagining that you start at the beginning of your turn, you gain 2 action points. I don't know what they call it. And you can use both and then get 2 again at the start of your next turn. Or you can use 1, carry 1 over, and then next turn you have 3. I like that. I mean, strategic. This is a guess. I'm predicting. I'm inferring from all the other stuff we've been reading. So we have unconscious. Okay. So after being unconscious, you can choose to regain consciousness at the end of any of your turns, no action required, or when effect heals you to at least 1 health. When you do so, other characters can sense that you're conscious. Haha. So no like playing dead. You remove the unconscious condition, and if you were at 0 health, you recover 1 health. But be careful with such low health, you could easily suffer another injury, this one potentially more dangerous or deadly. Let's read about that. When you're dealt damage, you reduce your current health by that amount. If you're wearing armor, your deflect value reduces the amount of damage you suffer. When you are reduced to 0 health, you become unconscious and suffer an injury, putting you at risk of serious injury or death. If your injury doesn't kill you, You remain unconscious until you choose to regain consciousness. So here we have injuries. I'm skipping ahead a smidge. You automatically suffer an injury when you are reduced to 0 health. When you suffer an injury, you roll a d20 and apply modifiers. So you apply the deflect value, any relevant modifier from talents or other abilities. So certain paths might provide abilities that impact an injury roll. And then you subtract 5 for every other injury you already have. Love that. Here, that's what I was looking for. Like getting rid of the rubber band effect we see in 5e 2014. Like there's no real consequence to hitting 0. That would be a fun table rule for 5e. I know Pathfinder has the dying condition, I think it is, that doesn't go away when you regain health above 0. So when you hit 0 again, you increase the value of your dying condition. And if you hit 4, like that, it kind of impacts death saves. I wonder if you did a similar kind of condition. I mean, this doesn't have death saves. This injury roll is essentially a death save. But thinking to try to port this, like do something similar in 5e without getting rid of death saving throws, because I don't mind death saving throws. I think they're really cool. It can be high drama. But if I was going to kind of get inspired by Cosmere's injury roll, like if you introduced injuries in the same way when someone hits 0 health, you wouldn't have a deflect value to add, and there would be no abilities that add to the injury roll. But I think it would be unfair to make it a -5, because that seems a lot. But I wonder if I like -2 penalty. Like I think you'd have to create some kind of a new condition that I don't think or you just house rule. You get the death's door condition or something like that, and if you have that condition, if you hit 0 health, you start at 1 with 1 failed death save. But then that becomes just another binary thing. There's no real penalty beyond falling to 0 a second time. But maybe you do. Maybe you do that. You getting closer to death's door condition. You hit 0 again. I think if you did the first time you hit 0, everything's normal. The next time you get up and then hit 0 again with a condition that's still with a persisting condition, dying, if you want to call it that. The second, like the first time you hit 0 with that dying condition, you have 1 failed death save on the Second time you hit 0 with the dying condition, you still have that one failed death save, not a cumulative, but just that one death save. And then you -2, maybe a -3 to your death saving throw. Maybe -2, and then forever, every time you go unconscious or hit 0 after that, you're adding another 2. Start at 2 and add another 2, going from 2 to 4 to 6. And at that point, like, you're rubber banding 4 or 5 times in a single combat, you are probably dead. So on a 16 or higher on your injury roll, it's just a flesh wound, and it's a temporary injury for the remainder of the day. Narrative, I think. Shallow injury, temporary injury of 1d6 days. Vicious injury on a 1 to 5. Temporary injury with the duration of 66 days. Then a permanent injury on a -5 to 0. And then you die if you rolled in -6, which I think would be impossible to roll. Unless you had 2 injuries. So basically, real risk of dying if you have 2 injuries, and then you have to roll another one. Very cool. And then there are effects. Okay, so each injury remains until it heals, or potentially forever for permanent injuries. When your character suffers an injury, you decide its effects based on what caused the injury and on your intention for your character's narrative. This effects table suggests some effects it could have, or you could roll it if you want to. So you could get the exhausted -1 effect, an exhausted -2 effect, a slowed effect, injured leg or foot, or any injury, disoriented, head wound, or widespread injury, surprised, overwhelmed due to the shock, or you can only use one hand, injured arm or hand, or any injury that lowers your overall coordination. Yeah, that'd be cool. A little section on portraying injuries and disabilities. Love that. Then death. Characters in this game are hardy, can usually withstand multiple grievous injuries before succumbing. Each injury your character suffers though imposes a -5 penalty on further injury rolls. If your injury roll results in a -6 or lower, you die. You get some final words. Then their cognitive aspect leaves their physical form, remaining in Shadesmar for a short period of time before their soul rejoins the spiritual realm from whence it came. Once the scene your character dies in ends, you may choose to take a moment to describe their soul passing into the beyond. This is an opportunity for a more introspective, peaceful farewell. If you die, your active surge effects end if they don't require spending investor each round. However, any other infused surges on your body there are odd circumstances in which the surge of progression or use of old magic can reattach a lingering soul to its body. However, the soul must be willing. Okay, so there's some type of progression, I think, is one of the healing surge bindings. And there's some, maybe a path that is actually using old magic that you could potentially, quote unquote, resurrect. But the assumption is if someone dies, that character's dead. Which I think would be, yeah. So short rest, uninterrupted period of hour or longer. You can roll your recovery die. Ooh, and you can whatever you on that recovery die, you can choose to split the die's total between your health and your focus, which is cool. Or you can forego using the recovery die to tend to others. You can provide medical assistance to one or more willing allies you're resting with. When you do, they add your medicine modifier to their recovery die roll. Or you can forage for resources or other. Nice. Anything that would require skill tests too demanding to accomplish while also resting. Some talents and other effects allow you to use or activate them during or after a short rest. Cool. Then long rest, 8 hours or longer, meaningful rest. Typically involves some time for relaxation and a full night's sleep, or a half day's sleep, since missions behind enemy lines require finding sleep whenever you can. Whenever you finish a long rest, you recover all your lost health and focus. You reduce your exhausted penalty by 1. Nice. And it looks like some things are like 1 per long rest. Then have combat. Order of combat. Everyone acts simultaneously. Yeah. Game divides time into a series of rounds. During each round, every participant gets a chance to take 1 turn. On your turn, you perform actions. Each round, you can either choose. Oh, so when that condition sets a slow turn, that is an actual effect, or an actual like mechanical thing. Each round, you can choose to take your turn fast or slow. If you act fast, you take your turn first before any enemies go, but you only get 2 actions to perform on your turn. If you instead choose to go slow, you act after any fast enemies, but you get 3 actions. You can change your choice each round, and your decision doesn't need to be made at the start of the round. If other PCs have resolved their fast turns and you decide you also want to act fast, you can decide in the moment. You're encouraged to coordinate with other players who are taking the same kind of turn as you. But if you can't decide, you should go first. Characters with the highest speed go first. I normally struggle with no set initiative order. Initiative is so straightforward, and it's rigid and not flexible. It does prevent teamwork and collaboration often, especially in 5e, where you can't, there's no, to my knowledge, there is no raw way of intentionally moving your turn to a different place in the initiative order in order to team up with a ally. So you end up having to like potentially like lose things like a bonus action or a move or movement to like hold an action for ally to do something. This though is a pretty elegant solution, and I apologize if another system does this exact same thing and I'm just unaware. But this is a pretty elegant initiative solve where you just pick fast or slow. If you picked fast and you're a PC, you go. And then the fast NPCs go. And then the slow PCs go. And then the slow NPCs go. That's great. If allied NPCs are fighting alongside the PCs, they take their turns at the same time as the enemy PCs. Nice. I like it because it's flexible without gray area. Like, it's flexible because you get to choose an option every round, but there is a clear round and there are only 2 options, and they both have their pros and cons. Compared to something recently like Daggerheart, or even like Star Trek Adventures, Modivia's 2D20, neither one, they have a very loosey-goosey initiative where there's even in things like Daggerheart, there's an opportunity for the same PC to take a turn twice before another PC does, if I'm remembering that correctly. So I like this a lot. It is flexible, but straightforward. It is clear without being rigid. Nice. At the start of combat, unless you're surprised, you gain a reaction, which lasts until the start of your first turn. And then at the start of each of your turns, you gain actions and a reaction that's used during the scene. Again, if you picked fast, you only get 2 actions. When they're just calling them actions, what I would call the play button, 2 actions. And then if you picked to do a slow turn, you get 3. You gain a reaction regardless if a faster turn is. Yeah. Oh, you may also gain additional action on talents or other abilities. So there's even the possibility for additional action. So it's not like 3 is like a hard and fast ceiling. Cool. Actions can only be taken during your turn, and so any remaining at the end of your turn are lost. Cool. I tried to guess the like action economy probably like half an hour ago when looking at a different set of rules before we got here, and I was wrong. That's because I was assuming initiative. This initiative is really good, but I really like it. So we do have surprise. Many combats start with one side ambushing the other. The GM determines who's surprised, and surprise is a condition, right? Yeah, surprise is a condition where you get surprised. You don't gain a reaction at the start of the combat, and then you have to take a slow turn. And you gain 1 fewer action. So if you were surprised, you don't get a reaction at the beginning of the combat, so you have to wait until your turn to do anything. You're taking a slow turn, which means any PC that opted to choose fast, which I would imagine everybody, or like, not everybody, I guess you don't have to, but every PC that chose to go fast is going ahead of you. And you're not going to be able to react to it until fast PC and then slow PC, and then slow NPC. So every PC is going ahead of you, assuming that we're talking about surprised NPCs. And then you only get 2 actions instead of the 3 you normally give a slow action. Elegant. Really, really cool. And then at the end of each character's first turn, they lose that condition. Sweet. Actions will be taken in your turn in combat. Each action can only be used once per turn unless stated otherwise. This includes those from talents and other effects, regardless of whether those actions are given a specific name. Some actions take more time than others. Say 1, 2, or 3 actions. On your turn, you can spend your available actions to use any of the actions listed below or any actions granted by your talents or other effects. So you can brace. You can raise a weapon with a defensive trait or hide in cover within 5 feet of you to defend yourself. After you brace, attacks against you gain disadvantage for as long as you keep. So basically, you would want to do this at the end of your turn because you basically lose this benefit by attacking or moving. If you're using a weapon with a defensive trait, you can move it around to protect yourself regardless of where the attack's coming from. If you're using cover, you're only protecting against attacks from the other side of that cover. Okay, so like, be logical, tracks. You can spend an action to disengage, carefully step away from an enemy. You move 5 feet and it doesn't trigger reactive strikes. Everybody has access to that for 1 action. Maybe there's a path that lets you disengage as a free action, but once per turn. Well, I guess all actions are once per turn. So you can spend an action to gain advantage. Use one of your skills to seek an advantage over your opponent, such as through clever tactics, unexpected feints, or superior strength. Explain how you're gaining advantage on an enemy. Make a test using a relevant skill against their corresponding defense. On a success, the next test against that enemy using a different skill gains an advantage. Love that. So you can't describe you knocking their shield down with your heavy weapon on your gain advantage action and then turn around and try to hit them with that same heavy weapon skill. You have to describe you doing something that wouldn't involve the same thing. Love that restriction. Super cool. You still do like a athletics, would probably be what you would do. What I like gaming it a bit, but it's a good restriction. You can spend an action to interact. Quickly interact with an object you can reach. Usually doesn't require a skill test. As with the use a skill action, which does require a skill test. So opening, closing a door, picking up an item, drawing or sheathing your weapon, retrieving something from your pack, passing something to another character, quickly eating pancakes, or removing or donning a simple piece of clothes. They snuck that one, second to last one in there. Love that. And then you can use the interaction action more than once per turn. First one we've seen where you can do it more than once. I wonder if there's a way for you to strike multiple times in a turn, but some type of penalty, kind of like the map in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. You can move with one action up to your movement rate. If you're crawling or being stealthy, you become slowed for that movement, which I believe is half your movement speed. Leaping or climbing as part of the movement may require an agility or athletics check. You can move more than once per turn. Strike. Attack using an unarmed attack or weapon that you're wielding against the physical defense of a target. You can use the strike action more than once per turn, but it has to be with a different weapon. Gotcha. There we go. Answered my just asked question. If you attack using a weapon held in an offhand, you must spend 2 focus. If it has the offhand trait, it only costs 1 focus. Special maneuvers and called shots. You aren't limited to a single manner of using your weapons. Feel free to come up with unconventional moves. See creative maneuvers later in this chapter. That's cool. We'll see if that means anything or if that's just a way of like, here's an example of how to narrate you hitting this thing with the thing that you've been hitting things with for a long time. Use one of the skills to perform challenging tasks around the battlefield. For example, using perception to search the environment, using stealth to hide, or using medicine to treat an ally. Yeah, this is good. Yep, it's good. If you have an idea that you don't feel like fits into this action, see the improvising and action sidebar. Yeah, just many things can be covered by broad actions such as use a skill, and then otherwise GM fiat. Tracks. Grapples 2 actions. Make an athletics check against their physical defense. On a success, they become restrained until either you become unconscious or you choose to end the effect, which is a free action, or they're no longer within your reach. You can ready. It's not really any action that you spend the number of action required, plus an additional. Okay, there you go. Prepare one of your other actions to perform in response to something happening on the battlefield. Choose the trigger you're waiting for, such as a character taking a certain action or gaining a certain condition, and the action you want to use in response. If that trigger happens before the start of your next turn, you can choose to use the chosen action in response to the trigger, even if it's not your turn. Your readied action must follow all other rules as if you were using on your turn. For example, if you already use a strike action with your weapon, you can't ready a second strike action. Love. Great. Elegant. Straightforward. Makes sense. I would maybe change this like the asterisk is good. I would maybe change this symbol from like the single action to maybe single action and the plus sign. To be like, it's one action plus whatever. It's not a single action to ready whatever. It's whatever amount of actions it would take for you to do that thing plus an extra one. Which makes sense and good balancing, I think. Recover 2 actions, take a deep breath, and you can roll your recovery die as if you just finished a short rest to recover health and or focus. and you can only use this once per scene. Okay. Something to track. And then shove 2 actions, athletic test against their physical defense. You move them 5 feet. If you successfully shove a character who has grappled you, it ends the grapple effect. Yeah, because they're no longer within range. But it seems like shoving is the way to break out of grappling. Is the way they kind of pinned that against grapple. It's like if someone grapples you and you want to get out, it's a shove attempt, which is an athletics test, and it takes 2 actions to try. It makes sense. It's 2 actions for 2 actions. So it's even. But making escaping or grapple require an athletics check. Huh. I wonder if there's a way for a speed focused character to get out of a grapple without relying on shove. My immediate thought. It might be a path specific ability that grants that, like access to a special action that does that. So we have free actions, follow the same rules as other actions. So you can only do it once per turn. And you can only do it on your turn unless it's a reaction. Well, there's only 2. Banter. You can only usually speak a sentence or 2, and the GM might limit you if you go over. More nuanced uses of speech as a persuading or deceiving something as a use of skill. Yeah. Or you can dropping objects. If you want to do it on someone else's turn, you must use the ready action. Okay, so if you have something in your hands and you gotta drop it somewhere, sometime off of your turn, it is, even though the dropping it's a free action, it is going to cost you 1 action to ready it. Good balancing. I like it. So we got reactions the way we think it does. There has to be a known trigger. So we have aid. It's a reaction. You step in to help an ally. After an ally makes a skill test, you can use this reaction and spend 1 focus to grant them advantage on their test. But to aid, you must be prepared and in range to realistically assist them. For example, you might aid them by their attack by flanking and distracting an enemy you're engaging with. Or if you're within speaking distance, you might coordinate with them to search for an adversary. After an ally makes a skill test, you can use this reaction and spend 1 focus to grant them advantage on their test. This is the kind of thing that will get caught in editing that I'm sure people who actually looked at this when this released 4 months ago caught that this will need to get reworded to either clarify that test, an advantage on that test, but probably reword after an ally makes a skill test, because it needs to, you need to describe do you have to decide to use the aid reaction before the result of the skill test has been determined? And then basically they've already rolled a d20 and they can roll another one? Or is it after an ally declares a skill test? I don't know. I haven't seen the right language to figure out how to word that, but it'll need clarifying. I read enough TTRPG books to immediately spot, that's not, that is not a clear action of what the requirement is. Avoid danger with a reaction. When you're in peril by your surroundings, you can use a reaction to attempt to save yourself. This might stop you from falling, dodge out of the way of incoming environmental danger, or otherwise avoid danger based on your situation. You do have to make an agility test to avoid it. If doing so in reaction to another test, the DC is equal to that test result. Otherwise, the DC is just a flat 15. Oof. If you fail, you don't avoid it. If you succeed, you avoid the danger to a reasonable degree. For example, if you're trying to avoid an area attack from the division surge, the GM might say you move 5 feet on a success. If this movement gets you out of the area, you aren't hit. But if the area is larger, you'll likely still be affected. The more narrative focused the danger, the more likely you can entirely avoid it, but any potential damage or repercussions are at the GM's discretion. I get what they're doing, and it's probably not a problem. But it's the kind of thing I don't love in I don't love in our combat scenes when, like, hey, this is the time for specific rules. We've created an entire type of scene and crafted basically an entire most of the rule set for our entire system are specific rules that we rely on when in these specific situations. So to have one of those actions, one of those specific rules be really unspecific. But at the same time, I get why I get why they went this way, because you want spending a reaction is honestly probably not that big of an investment, and you want it to make sense narratively in the world. You don't want just to give people, you don't want to make this a save where people just start taking half damage for everything. We haven't seen that kind of language before. So I get it. It's not it's not a hill I'm willing to die on. It's a very light gripe. Dodge. Also a reaction when an enemy targets you with an attack, but before dice are rolled, you can use this reaction and spend 1 focus to add disadvantage to their attack test. You can't use this reaction on area effects or on those that target multiple characters, though you may be able to use avoid danger to move out of the way. Okay. I like that. In so much as that it imposes disadvantage, I like it. Reactive strike, reaction. As an enemy falls back, you use the opening to attack. When an enemy voluntarily leaves the reach of a melee weapon you're wielding, you can use this reaction and spend 1 focus to make an attack using that weapon against the enemy's physical defense. Cool. But because a reaction is not an action, actions do not have the same limitations as actions and free actions. So, well, I guess. Oh, the way that it's worded is that reactive strike is not making a strike. It is you make an attack using that weapon and against the enemy's physical defense. Now you might say, Zach, that's just the description of what strike does. Right, but with a strike, you can only use the strike action once per turn, or if you can't use the strike action with the same weapon you've already attacked with. But reactive strike, you're not striking. You're simply making an attack with that weapon against the enemy's physical defense. And therefore, you can use a reactive strike the same round that you use a strike. Now, probably you could also get away with it in that the rule says you can only use the strike action with the same weapon once per turn. And with a reaction, by default, it's not your turn. They probably could just cut corners and say, use this reaction and spend 1 focus to make a strike using that weapon, and then like don't have to like describe what the strike is, but extra clarity. Attacking. When you attack a target, you roll to see how well your attack hits. These attacks can be weapon attacks made by using the strike action, special attacks gained by talent, or even attacks that use the power of the surges. Attacks always include an attack test. Special kind of skill tests with a few extra rules. Primary distinction between acts and other skill tests is that attacks are meant to deal damage. So you choose a target. Most only target one character at a time, but some allow multiple. If it's a melee attack, they have to be within your reach. If it's a ranged attack, they can be anywhere within the specified range. You roll. It's a skill test against the specified defense. You gain disadvantage if a target isn't in your line of sight. At the same time as you roll the usual dice for a skill test, also roll the number of damage dice specified in your attack. Interesting. They just want you to roll all at the same time to be quick and easy. I think that's fine. I know some 5e tables that do that just to like keep things along. If your test fails, you miss, dealing no damage. However, when this happens, you can decide to graze them. Whenever you miss one or more targets, you can spend one focus per target of your choice to instead graze them. This deals damage equal to the total rolled on the whoa. Spend a focus to deal damage if you hit. Oh, deal damage equal to the total rolled on the damage die plus your modifier for the skill you use for the test. Gotcha. So on a graze, you don't get to include. Oh, and your damage. That means your damage is going to scale as you add skill ranks in that attacking skill. Love that. Okay. I'm putting it together, painting a picture. And then on a critical hit, whenever you hit with an attack, you can find a weakness by spending an opportunity, changing the hit into a critical hit. This maximizes the result of your damage dice against all targets at that attack. Treat all damage dice as if they rolled their highest number. And remember, if an attack deals impact, keen, or energy damage, the damage then reduced by the target's deflect value. I'm trying to think. I was having a thought. The way they're phrasing spending an opportunity is interesting. I wish they bit the bullet and made opportunity and consequences an actual meta currency that has like some type of persistency, even if it was just within the same scene and then they all go away. Of like, and maybe PCs can only ever have 2 opportunity on hand. But giving people the opportunity to just bank an opportunity instead of having to come up with an immediate narrative bonus for an opportunity, I think it would both relieve some mental load and adds a level of potentially strategic, though there's certainly an opportunity for bad actors to game it a little bit. But just a thought. And the way they phrased it makes me think it's like spending an opportunity. I don't know. Just a thought I'm having. Ranged attacks and reach. Oh yeah. Ranged attacks when you're within reach of an enemy are at disadvantage. If you're attacking a target who's within 5 feet of an ally, raise the stakes of the attack. If the attack misses and you roll a complication, it grazes your ally. Nice. If you don't have stable footing, ranged attack gains disadvantage. Nice. Attacks. Some attacks on multiple targets. For these attacks, roll your attack test and damage dice as normal. Then compare the results of this one test roll to the defense of each target. You have to spend an additional focus to graze per target. Area attacks target all characters or a specified subset of characters within a physical area. Many surges allow you to make these powerful attacks, as do a few other abilities. When you make an area attack, follow the above rules. And yeah, okay. Create maneuvers. Adding variety to combat's fun. Whether you're disarming your foe or pinning their hands at the table, to keep things simple, this game doesn't provide separate rules for a long list of combat maneuvers, but that doesn't mean they can't be part of your story. In general, if you want to execute a creative maneuver, this falls under the strike action. When you strike, describe how you want to attack. If the GM agrees your maneuver is possible, they'll choose a defense for you to target and potentially impose one or more disadvantages depending on how complex your maneuver is. If this attack test succeeds, the GM determines any narrative or mechanical effects of your maneuver. Heavy weapons tend to favor maneuvers that damage things in the environment, drive back foes, or otherwise take advantage of the weapon's weight and reach. When testing heavy weapons, the GM might apply fewer disadvantages to maneuvers that exploit these strengths. Fewer disadvantages. Fewer disadvantages. This is the first time when talking about advantage and disadvantage that there's been any amount of implication that it isn't a binary state where it goes from normal to disadvantage, where you just impose disadvantage. Like, just impose disadvantage. If it had advantage, it now becomes a straight roll. But fewer disadvantages? That is unclear. And I feel like it's probably going to get cleaned up. Or something's going to change there. That doesn't feel consistent with the rest of the rules we've been reading. Targeting range, line of effect, looking at, okay. Range, I don't like, okay, that's fine. So we have characters, player characters, NPCs, animals, yeah. Objects, something that isn't a character but could have recently been picked up or moved around. An enemy, an ally, you, the target, and then sometimes others. Movement, positioning, character sizes. Are we assuming 5 foot? But yeah, we are. Squeeze movement, standard movement, flying. Okay, all these are things that like blah. So how do we use a grid? Yeah, 1 inch squares. 1 inch square represents 5 feet. Does the Pythagorean theorem exist on a grid? Some prefer to use, I might use hex. That could be fun. I've never played or ran a game that defaulted to a hex combat map. Could be fun here though, because it doesn't. Okay, so yeah, same as 5e at D&D, where Pythagorean theorem does not exist, and it's just 5 feet regardless. You can't move diagonally if you cross a corner that is obstructed by an enemy wall or, yeah. Range, yeah, okay. Opportunities and complications in combat. Some talents and enemy profiles suggest uses for opportunities and complications. Oh, that's nice. Some of the best stories come from creative interpretations of these plot die outcomes. Use your environment and the strengths and weaknesses of your enemies to create memorable and fun effects. While defeating your enemies is usually a primary goal, you're often trying to accomplish something else. Think about ways you can use your opportunities and complications to advance or hinder your goals in the scene. Sure, you're attacking, but why? Combat opportunities and combat complications table provides inspiration. You or the GM might roll a d12 on this table, choose an entry, or create your own. Okay, that's cool. Examples are good. All right, game mastering. Finally, yeah. Oh, I just realized there was no content or character creation rules. Shit, I might have to. I am over 3 hours into this stream and it is 12:30. I'm gonna need to. Shit. I need to look at least a character sheet. Got to. Use the plot die. When to raise the stakes. Knowing when and how to do so is key. Raise the stake too often, it'll stop being exciting, but use it too sparingly, you'll miss out on its storytelling power. Agreed. Doesn't need to just be used on important intents. It can raise the stakes to highlight any test that's important to the story, a character, or the game session. You might raise the stakes when a character finds a creative solution to a problem. When a character executes a high risk, high reward plan. Yeah, for sure. Or when a character leans into their character's motivations, such as choosing a suboptimal plan because it's consistent. You should raise the stakes about a third of rolls throughout the course of a game session. Okay. When using the plot die, you're not alone. Encourage your players to ask to raise the stakes when they feel events are brushing up against their purpose, obstacle, and goals. Frees you to pay more attention to when raising the stakes makes sense for the scenario rather than trying to also worry about each individual PC. That's good advice. Also, when an opportunity or complications roll, don't be afraid to open the floor for players to give their own suggestions. On complications especially, you might be surprised at how much harsher the recommendations are than what you had in mind, and how willing players are for their characters to suffer for the sake of a good story. In addition to relieving some of your cognitive load, these methods have the benefit of giving your players a greater agency in what's happening. Yeah. Alternate skills. A good advice is just, I don't love when stuff like that's mentioned. It's not that that should be stated in a player forward section of the book and not buried in the game mastering section. Like, if a player reads the book or some type of like quick start and learns what the plot die does, but the quick start or the player centric section of the rules says what it says, that on an opportunity the player gets to decide and the GM has to accept, or on a complication the GM gets to decide by fiat, but then all of a sudden at the table the GM is like, what do you think happens with the complication? Like, the player might not have been mentally prepped for that, or they might read the rules in the player centric section and be like, this sounds mean, this sounds confrontational, and I don't enjoy games like that, and just don't play. It's like, move this to at least minimum a sidebar of the player section and then repeat it here for sure. Alternate skills. When revolving a skill test, when the stakes are raised, consider that character's other skills. An opportunity or complication could represent one of those skills. Oh, a character might be grappling with an opponent using athletics, and rolling an opportunity could allow them to pick that opponent's pocket at the same time. Alternatively, a complication instead could mean that the opponent did the same thing back to them. Oh, well, that's not what alternate skills mean. but it's good advice. Luck and fortune. Incidental could just represent incidental effects. A character attempting to deceive a crowd in a city could roll a complication, causing them to realize that someone they used to know is among the crowd. Oh, okay. Yeah. Advancing the story. Ultimately, opportunities and complications are a tool to help deepen the story and move it in interesting directions. If you have a story event that you plan to reveal in a given scene, why not tie it to the role of an opportunity or complication? Maybe you're planning on having bandits ambush the party later. Instead of just having them pop up, you could wait until a complication's rolled and have the bandits choose that moment to appear. Yeah. Using events. I do like events. Those seem cool. Oh yeah, conversations. I'm sure they'll get like more spelled out. Order of conversations. Each time you meaningfully influence a conversation, you're making a contribution. Time isn't tracked concretely. While many conversations you'll find yourself might not be polite, it's important that out of character everyone's having fun. Okay, yep. Contributions. Anytime a character tries to influence the direction of the conversation, push the participants one way or another, support someone, or gain more insight into the situation, they're making a contribution. These contributions aren't intended as rules to limit the scene, but to provide more support for roleplay. How a given contribution is resolved depends on what you're attempting. Yeah. They can influence a person, help or hinder efforts, bolster an ally, gather information, or inject flavor. Nice. When to test. Nearly any skill could be used in a conversation at the GM's discretion. Agreed. Example, opportunity, and complication table. Love that. Your focus represents your mental wherewithal, concentration, and patience, making it important during conversations. Until you run out of focus, you can use it to avoid being influenced. Oh, that's cool. When a character succeeds on a skill test against an opponent, or otherwise does something very persuasive, their opponent can choose to spend focus to resist influence. The amount of focus required depends on how persuasive the GM decides the contribution was. If reasonably persuasive, an opponent must spend 2 focus to remain resolute. In a way, focus can reflect each person's patience for or resistance to a particular argument. The GM can use an NPC's current focus as a timer to represent how much work it'll take to convince them. It might take several successful contributions to wear down a stubborn NPC with a lot of focus, but if the GM decides that a particular argument is incredibly persuasive, they might choose to not resist at all. Nice. Conversations, your opponents will be the ones resisting influence, not you. Depending on how the conversation goes, the GM might ask you to resist influence at some point, but the way you roleplay these is up to you. Yeah. When a character reduces 0 focus, they become too frustrated, scattered, or distracted to effectively contribute. They can no longer resist being influenced and might check out of the conversation entirely. PCs with no focus, consider a role-playing cue to move to a different tactic. A hothead might decide to start a fight, while a more reserved character might decide to give up on the conversation. When a player character loses focus, this never forces them to do something or believe an idea they disagree with. You can have your character change their mind if you wish, but it's up to you. Hey, I thought this is the game mastering, but they all of a sudden switched to talking about the players like you. I think. Yeah, you can have your character change your mind. Yeah, types of things that'll be caught in editing. But I was just wait, what's happening? Endeavors. Oh, okay, so these would be extended tasks. I like endeavor for a word for it though. And then we have a threshold. Usually kept secret, just informing how the GM tells the story. When you reach a needed number of successes, you get your goal. But if you failed too many times, yeah. So it's just a test track, extend task, blah, blah, blah. Here's an example of some thresholds, interpreting different skill tests, determining outcomes. Yeah. Ooh, okay. Canon. I love how they're calling this straight out in like the beta rules. The Stormlight Archive novels provide a vast wealth of information and resources for role players to incorporate into their game. Knowing the particulars of different rockbud varieties or a culture's unique green can add flavor, but are not essential to good gameplay. When role-playing on Roshar, it's often the small touches that have the biggest impact on immersing you. The GM and players can narrate singer characters humming to rhythms when they need to convey emotions, describe the flora retracting at a character's approach, or detail the sprint that appear around the characters. Nice. When planning adventures, take into account the era and specific timeline of your campaign, using current events to add context and momentum throughout the campaign. Consider major developments for the singers and their forms, the Knights Radiant, the Forces of Odium, international affairs, enemy occupations, and fabrial science during that timeline. However, just because something happened in the novels doesn't mean it has to happen in your game the same way. You can change the future or even Roshar's history to suit your need. And then just, you have to have a conversation, session 0 of like how closely you want to follow canon. Some groups may wish to be unfettered by continuity. This could be as dramatic as replacing the protagonists of the books with your group's player characters, or as subtle as adjusting the timing and particulars. To its advantage, it could cause your game to diverge from future events. If you don't want to have to worry about reshaping the future, you might instead create a campaign set in the distant past during the cycle of desolation. So, that'd be fun. Consult an online wiki. The Coppermind. The Coppermind's great. Honestly, the Coppermind is probably the best fan managed. It's tied there with Memory Alpha and Wikipedia for Star Trek and Star Wars, in terms of feature and just the breadth of knowledge stored in it. My favorite aspect of the Coppermind wiki is that you can basically time travel and set, like, they have novels from the Cosmere set in a, like, as close to some type of chronological order that they can, and you can basically pick a book and it will roll, like, certain entire articles or parts of articles are changed or hidden or reverted to different content based on the timeline you picked, which is really, really great. Really cool. The default campaign setting for the Cosmere RPG spans the first 5 novels in the series. The first book, I was about to say, like, at least realistically, it's really kind of happening towards the end of Words of Radiance, if not Oathbringer. But yeah. If playing a canonical campaign, be thoughtful about spoilers. Has everybody in the group read and finished the series? If not, that's fine. As long as they're okay with spoilers that may arise, the group can work together. Yeah. New players in canon. A player who's completely unfamiliar with the books might choose to play as someone from a remote part of Rosar so they can learn about the world. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Every GM's different. Yep. Focus is on telling a great story. Use session 0 to set expectations for your GM style and align with your group on expectations for canon and continuity. Safety guide, safety tools. Do it. It's important. Session 0. Yep. Also important. Campaign expectations, table expectations, safety tools, gameplay guidance, character creation. Identify fun and unfun topics. Lines of Veils. I use Lines of Veils in my games. Check-ins. I just did a major check-in via survey, Google form survey to my multi-year long 5e campaign. All right, we got some content specific stuff. Then we have adversaries. I haven't seen stat blocks yet. Ooh, axe hounds. Ooh, these designs are good. Yeah, these are good. Straightforward, easy to pick out. Tier 1. So we got tiers. I like that. We have minion, rivals, and bosses. Very cool. Ooh. Stormfall Regal. So this is a singer who is bonded with a Stormspren. This is a storm form, and they're only tier 2. 40 health, 5 investiture. Bolt of lightning for 1 investiture, plus 7 to hit. 60-foot range, 1 target. Ooh, they have to spend a focus to not automatically get disadvantage. Damn. But does 2d8, potentially 15 energy damage. Yay. Super cool. Ooh, Warform. Nimble form. Got some spear infantry. Bridge 4. A swarm of gremlings. Nice. This is super cool. Alright, I need to quickly fire up. Oh shoot, do I not have the... Oh no. I don't have the Bridge 9 pre-gens downloaded. Downloading them really quickly right now. It'll take me 2 seconds. Thank you, Drive-Through RPG, for being honestly really great. So easy to use, especially when I was just on it, so I was logged in. All right, let's do Ved level 1 warrior. Okay, so we've got a warrior, maybe like a soldier background. I guess we don't know how his attributes are generated. Though it does look like maybe his warrior path gave him an extra skill in heavy. Heavy weapons. So he's an expert in both Alethi and Herdazian languages and military life. The hammer, long spear, and breastplate. So he gets access to those items. Expert traits. I have some background notes. Ooh, I kind of like this. Oh, or yeah, where's his purpose? Obstacle. Finding meaning in hardship by helping those who are even less fortunate than you. Obstacle. Slow to anger, but you can lose control when you succumb to rage. I have goals with little... Ooh, that's cool. Help the members of your crew. We have connections. Other members of Bridge 9, including Doral, Kesh, Uran, and Jamari. You've also drawn the attention of a strange spren. You've never gotten a closer look at it, or a clear look at it, but you have the sense that it appears as a streak of light. Oh, a little wind spren? Well, streak of light. Is that wind or is that honor spren? Drawing a blank. So that was a warrior. Let's look at leader, and then we'll call it a night. 3.5 hour long stream. So this is a leader champion. Not sure if this is a background that's picked, maybe. Strong, high strength and presence, which sounds right for a leader. Like, kind of lower on cognitive spiritual. But I kind of like that we're not seeing any attributes that are 0. Oh, definitely not negative. 13 health to deflect from his armor? No. So maybe he has... I don't see anything saying that he gets to add his speed to his deflect value, but maybe you always do? I don't know. Interesting. Cool. 2 skill points in leadership and 2 in heavy weapons for his long spear. Purpose: fight injustice by inspiring others to be their best selves. Obstacle: your high moral standards could come across as arrogance or inflexibility. I like it. Goal: get promoted to sergeant. It's cool. I dig. Sweet. Well, not shocked that didn't have character creation, but that will be kind of not make or break. Well, yeah, kind of make or break. But there is absolutely a very good system here. I was really worried that this was just going to be like a 5e reskin with like bad class implementation. What did I read that was like that? The Stargate RPG. Gosh, from a couple years ago. It was so disappointing as a huge Stargate fan, to the point where like I've attempted to like create hacks of systems that I think would fit better, because that absolutely should not have been a 5e game. But yeah, this is a very good game, I think. Or like if you like 5e, the changes Brotherwise has made for Cosmere has only made that better. Now, if you don't like 5e for big reasons, I don't know if there's enough changed for you to be like, if you're not a huge Sanderson Cosmere fan, for you to like see past the D20-ness of it all and enjoy it. I think it has sanded off some of the sharp, annoying corners of 5e, streamlined a couple things, made some smart, elegant choices that fit with, I think, the type of story Cosmere games are going to tell kind of by default. And like I said, if you like 5e, there's just more to like here. The infrastructure, don't know how character creation plays out specifics, but really character creation is there to give specific characters exemptions to rules. So you can kind of imagine the type of thing that will be in at least the first few levels of the paths. I'm really interested to see how, like, the assumption around radiance and being a surge binder and how all that gets gamified. But the baseline, like, D20 infrastructure is good. It's very good in my opinion. There are still things about it that are the same things I don't like about 5e. It's mainly disadvantage and advantage. I think there are better ways to handle the penalties or bonuses that those tend to give. And I think by utilizing advantage and disadvantage, they are creating situations where I think they want characters to pick an option that is going to, like, mathematically be a worse option than just taking advantage, since advantage is an option with, you know, other stuff. But at the same time, like, some of the struggles with advantage and disadvantage in 5e comes from both the action economy and the way that resources are handled, and the kind of unbounded math of it all. It's possible that with tighter modifiers, and some of the like some simple things like grazing, additional resources like focus, smaller health pools, some of that could alleviate some of it. So we'll see. I was cautiously optimistic about this game, knowing that I would want to own it just as a collector. And I have several friends. Most of them I have several of my friends, in my gaming group, have read Mistborn, not Stormlight, but I think there would be enough interest to try this and potentially try to tell it in a way that either wouldn't spoil it, or the players would have to know that they're not going into the books, if they decide to read the books, completely blind, or completely spoiler free. Yeah, it was really good. Super excited to see the final stuff for Stormlight coming out this year. And really, like, this infrastructure's really good. And I'm interested to see how much it changes for Mistborn. Going from, like, do the paths stay the same? Maybe they've constructed the paths in a way where they do, and instead of eventually becoming radiant, you eventually get a grip on your metal burning. I don't know. We'll see. Gosh, I can't believe I stuck it out for this now 3.5 hour stream. This was kind of a random thought I had. Glad I did it. This was good. As we get more material for the Cosmere, I'll absolutely be checking it out and hopefully maybe making videos about it. I'm in the mood to be making TTRPG content again. It's been a minute, but I'm kind of in the mood. Part of me wants to chase it while I'm feeling it. Part of me wants to admit that I don't always feel like making it, and I shouldn't create bad expectations that I'm gonna like dedicate myself to a project if my attention span isn't gonna handle it. So we'll see. But yeah. Thanks to anybody who's watching or watching the VOD, tuning back in. I doubt folks are gonna want to scrub through a 3.5 hour video when I'm sure there are much better scripted, shorter videos out there. But I enjoy doing this for me, so I hope you enjoyed it for you too. I hope you have a great night if it's nighttime where you're watching. It is well past my bedtime. I'm gonna go to bed. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your next gaming session, whether it is 5th edition or Pathfinder or Traveler or Powered by the Apocalypse or something I'm not thinking of. Enjoy. Hope you have a great day.